Sword of Coming Chapter 1232. Chapter 1232. Unexpected romance. When one walks in the mountains, the wind stirs up the pines and waves, and one hears the sound of swords and halberds, birds flying upward from the cliffs and clouds rising from the clouds. The little girl in black patrolled the mountain all the way to the cliff, and followed the two men Chief Zhou and Xianxia who were dragging oil bottles. After sitting down, Xiao Mili began to distribute melon seeds. Even without speaking, no one felt the atmosphere was awkward. Qin Pingon was chewing melon seeds and suddenly asked a strange question. The former Jiang Xianxia has become the chief of the week today. Will there be any big regrets? The peak master of Jui Peak of Jade Gui Sect, Jiang Thief of Beiju Luzhou, Zhou Fei of Spring Chao Palace of Lotus Flower Blessed Land, the head of the Jiang family who once went on a killing spree in Yunku Blessed Land, and Yi Xiu of Shijianhu Xinjing Sect. Lu Laoqing didn't dare to have any dissatisfaction with Jiang Sect Master, and Jiang Xianxia was thrown from his chair in the Xinzhuan Peak Patriarch Hall. If Jiang Xianxia wants to adapt and integrate into Luopa Mountain, it is equivalent to accommodating Luopa Mountain, which means that Jiang Xianxia is no longer the same Jiang Xianxia as before. The most troublesome part is that there are many smart people on Luopa Mountain. If they are two people, they seem to be inseparable, and their relationship is destined not to last long. Therefore Jiang Xianxia, who practices to do whatever he wants and is never forced to make a choice, seems to have to make a choice. Jiang Xianxia smiled from ear to ear. When I reunited with Sect Master Tui in Tongye Continent, he asked me similar questions. As expected of my husband and students, they all have similar thoughts. Qin Pingon asked, "What was your answer at that time?" Jiang Xianxia smiled and said, "Forgot." Qin Pingon stopped asking questions and began to change the subject. "Aren't you too busy going back to Tongyi's house?" Jiang Xianxia nodded and said, "I am the chief of Shangzong." Xiao Mili looked at Miyu, put his hand to his mouth and said in a low voice, Yumi, Chief Zhou ordered you." Miyu, who originally wanted to pretend to be stupid, had no choice but to say, "Master Yingguan, since the old deaf boy is here, can you let him be the chief minister of the Qingping Sword Sect? I am willing to give way." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "No, if you add another burden to the old deaf child, he may pack up and run away." Miyu still didn't give up. "Shall I go and persuade you?" Qin Pingon said angrily, "Just be a human being." Miyu had no choice but to give up. Jiang Xianxia asked with a smile, "Has the mountain master thought about the parting gift?" Qin Pingon nodded and said, "It just so happens that I have a small family and I have a talisman in my hand." Miyu coughed. Qin Pingon came to his senses and made a mistake. Cui Dongshan once said something very Cui Dongshan, which roughly means that as a student he is only good at destroying people's hearts, but Mr. Qin Pingon is good at repairing people's hearts. Qin Pingon did not delve into how sincere this compliment was. But Qin Pingon remembered Cui Dongshan's words very well and regarded them as a very weighty reminder, even a slap. Therefore Qin Pingon has been asking himself whether his husband's words and deeds are worthy of his students' words. This is very Qin Pingon. Maybe this is one of the reasons why Qin Pingon is Qin Pingon? Jiang Xianxia asked, "I heard that the mountain owner is in urgent need of gold and copper coins?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "That's enough for the time being. Don't squander the reputation that old sect master Jiang has managed to accumulate. What is lacking now cannot be bought with money, so it is more difficult to deal with." Jiang Shang really understood what he was talking about, and he was referring to the sword sharpening stone made of the dragon-slaying platform. This thing is really not too much for a sword cultivator. Even if you are not a swordsman, you are willing to collect it. It is a typical priceless thing. The number of flying swords a sword cultivator has is not absolutely linked to their killing power or future achievements. On the Great Wall of Sword Qi, there are many swordsmen who can pierce through the wild formations with only one flying sword. But no sword cultivator in the world would dislike him for having an extra flying sword. There are only a few sword cultivators with 2 natal flying swords. Compared to those with 1, the number has dropped off a cliff. As for sword cultivators with as many as 3 flying swords, it cannot be said that there are only a handful of sword cultivators in the 10,000-year history of the Sword Qi Great Wall. But if they were given a piece of paper at the Summer Palace, they would not be satisfied with their names. Qiuji, the youngest master of Jui Peak in the history of Jade Guizhong, has 3 natal flying swords. Yao Xiaoyan, the most inconspicuous among the 9 children, also has 3. Pei Min, one of Haoran's 3 masters of swordsmanship, has 4 swords. Pei Min is also the swordsman with the largest number of flying swords that Qin Pingon knows so far. Jiang Shangzhen said, only when sword cultivators talk about this, will they feel that there is still some benefit left in having only one natal flying sword. Miyu asked in his heart. Lord Yinguan, Chief Zhou and I will return to Tongyi's Hao in a big way, and then secretly visit Longji Mountain? Mida Jiangxian's voiceover is that we secretly cut off a few pieces to solve the urgent need first. Qin Pingon laughed angrily and said, I am now the Grand Master of the Great Li Kingdom. Why don't you give me a try? Miyu glanced at Jiang Shangzhen. Chief Zhou was able to do such things as guarding and stealing. Jiang Shangzhen said, every time a sword cultivator uses a sword sharpening stone, there is one less dragon-slaying platform in the world. It is really difficult to deal with. Zhou Xian has money, status, merit, and reputation. Zhou Xian has all the enviable things that a qi practitioner should have and more than others. Even though he was so wealthy in every aspect, when he talked to Qin Pingon about the dragon-slaying platform business, the old man was very embarrassed. He didn't dare to make any guarantees, so he could only say that he would help to talk to his old friends and make connections. Whether they are willing to sell it and at what price they will sell it all depends on fate. Jiaoliu Mountain, which is recorded in the secret records of Delahubu, is commonly known as Longji Mountain in the town. There are 4 forces that started the mountain here, including the Song family of Dali Ruanqiong, and the 2 military strategists of Beipingzu Fengxue Temple and Zhenwu Mountain. This mountain has been closed for nearly 30 years. There are many levels of checkpoints and formations, and it is heavily guarded. Anyone who enters the mountain without permission will be executed. When Qin Pingon now has the identity of a greatly national master, of course he can come and go freely. However, the Dali Imperial Court was only responsible for helping to open the mountain and expose the dragon-slaying platform, and did not participate in carving up these purest sword-sharpening stones. The dragon-slaying platform, which originally belonged to Fengxue Temple and Longquan Sword Sect, was actually an empty shell. Huge sacrifices lead to generous rewards. For example, the founder of Fengxue Temple secretly obtained an ancient sword technique and became an immortal with it. At the same time, this sword vein allows sword cultivators to point directly at Yupu, allowing sword cultivators to open their homes. Forming the Golden Pill, breaking through the realm of Yuanying and ascending to the realm of Jade Pu, on these 3 major monastic passes, it is like divine help, building long bridges and eliminating many resistances. In this way, the so-called direct pointing is worthy of its name. After seeing Old Sword Tiao, Ruanqiong also acquired an incredible sword-making skill. Of all the dragon-slaying platforms mined before that, Ruanqiong, who was the chief minister of the Song family in Dali, only had a small part left for his family. Longquan Sword Sect was a swordsmanship sect after all, and most of the rest was given to him. The Emperor of Dali gave it to the Mo family, who helped build sword boats and mountain ferries. As debt repayment, the most important basic material for the city built by the Mahist family in the wild world is the dragon-slaying platform. Therefore, Zhenwu Mountain is the only one left that has not lost its ancestral heritage. There were 2 execution platforms in the ancient heaven, one of which was called the dragon-slaying platform. It was shattered during the battle to reach the sky and fell to the earth. The 2 largest ones were the Longji Mountain in Lizhu Cave and the pavilion on the top of Ningfu on the Great Wall of Sorqi. The hill. According to Chunyang Lian, Longji Mountain has many ancient names, including Zhenin, Tianbi, Windmill, Liaoding, etc. There was once a cave in the mountain called Tianquakeng Cave, which was the most important geomantic treasure land in ancient Shu. Ningyao once entrusted Zhang Lu, the gatekeeper of Xianxia Mountain, to give Qin Pingon of the Stork in a dragon-slaying platform shaped like a long ink stone, with Zhenzhen inscribed on one side. It seems that Tianbi and Zhenin each have a set of words. When Qin Pingon heard about Lu Yan's secret, he went to ask Ningyao. Ningyao said that it was the boss sword Immortal's intention to give this thing away. It's just that Qin Kingda's comments about Qin Pingon to Ningyao at that time were not very pleasing to the ears. The boss swordsman said that the poor boy was dark and not handsome at all. Although his eyes were bright, they made him darker and his appearance was a bit ugly. But no matter what, the young martial artist could. I traveled thousands of miles across the sea and almost lost my life in Jiaolong Valley. I crossed Daoist Mountain just to give you a sword to Ningyatu. After meeting each other and having a little drink, I dared to say that I like you and pursue my dream. A woman's shamelessness, that boy of his has got the essence, not to mention he has a lot of tenacity in him, not bad. Since he likes you and you don't hate him, you should express your feelings no matter what. I think that dragon-slaying stone is very good. There is this thing in his hometown. Money fans already know how valuable this thing is. He is not a chi refiner now. If a scholar, let alone a swordsman, is on his way back to his hometown, for example in that stinky lotus root blessed land, the boy is lucky enough to rebuild the Chongqing Bridge. One day he is short of money and in order to break the situation he is willing to sell it at a high price. Or secretly whoever pawns this thing shows that this person is poor-minded and unstable, and is definitely not a good match. Especially if she becomes a sword cultivator in the future, is tempted by the realm and sword refining, and secretly spends time in this dragon-slaying platform, she would rather not be fooled by his sweet words. This kind of man is still undesirable. Ning Yao frowned when he heard this and only waited for Qin Qing to finish speaking before giving his own thoughts and answers. I don't want to test him like this and he doesn't need to be tempted like this. If the person who said these words was not the boss sword Immortal, Ning Yao would use a more direct statement. This was her insulting Qin Pingon, and it was also Ning Yao who was insulting herself. Qin Qingdu couldn't stop laughing at that time and said with emotion, "Love is invincible and Ning Yao is no exception. The love between boys and girls is really beautiful." Afterwards, the boss Zhou Xian gave a reason that Ning Yao was willing to accept. He said that this thing hides a lot of opportunities and will help Qin Ping's future practice. That kid is smarter and may one day be able to figure it out. It's a mystery but you can't remind him, otherwise he will be completely off topic. A chance? Boss sword Immortal, even if you change the term and say it's a literary relationship, I might think more about it. Otherwise I would definitely not think twice about this love token given by Ning Yao. Opportunity? Being able to be with Ning Yao is the greatest fate. Besides remembering and seeing Innocent and Ning Yao every time and simply thinking about her, what else can I think about? Perhaps this is the so-called predestined relationship that has not yet arrived, not to mention asking for it but not getting it, not knowing how to ask for it or even not knowing that it is necessary to ask for it. Even after reviewing the situation with Ning Yao, Qin Pingon was roughly sure that what the boss sword Immortal called a big opportunity was the Quokeng Cave sky and the half of the dragon-slaying platform. Even if he missed it, it would be nothing. He never missed her. Thinking back to those days at the Great Wall of Sword Chi, you thought Ning Yao wouldn't let me in just because I had a drink with friends at a liquor store? Of course that's not true, it's totally wrong. If any dares to misunderstand me, I will let him know what it means to be a scholar and what the simple folk customs of my hometown town are. That's because I don't want to come in. It's cool outside and am drunk lying down and taking a nap. It's full of flavor. It's very interesting to chat about old almanacs with Grandpa Nalen, the gatekeeper. Jimwu Mountain, it seems that I still have to visit it this year. The first thing is to talk about the dragon-slaying platform and see if there is any room for negotiation. More importantly, Qin Pingon was the protector who wanted to see Ma Kushuan. This person is certainly not a bad person. He is even different from many people who practice Taoism on the mountain. Of course, in Liju Cave he did not make things difficult or scheme against Qin Pingon. It's just that the other party once gave up a certain principle to the straw sandals boy. Qin Zhenxian, who is now the mountain master, took this principle to see him. Things are simple. After the last discussion in the ancestral hall, Qin Pingon went to the New Year's shop to reconcile with shopkeeper Shi as usual. Zhou Junchen, the second disciple who likes to be a little mute, now that they meet each other, although there is still no smile, he will take the initiative to call Qin. It's safe to say that master is here. Qin Pingon would only nod and say yes. In fact, I feel so beautiful. Shi Ro told the little mute in private that it was obvious that Shanjuchen was very happy that you could take the initiative to call him master. The little mute curled his lips and said that the master was busy with big things, so how could his mood fluctuate because of such a trivial matter? However, the child said this and was in a good mood because when he stood on the bench and read a book, his whole state was relaxed. The child no longer looked like he was curled up in a corner watching the world carefully. Qin Pingon seemed to casually ask about Yuan Huang. Jiang Shangzhen said that this boy is really good, has good aptitude and good temperament, and is quite suitable to settle in Luopa Mountain. His future martial arts achievements will probably not be lower than those of Zhong Qian and Chao and I. In fact, Qin Pingon hopes that through the products can be made Huanglong Genkyo Jiajiaomijin. This guy was already very good at talking before he went up the mountain. Since Yuan Huang is like this, then Chief Zhou and Master Jia are also the same. This proves that what the atmosphere in my mountain has to do with me. I can't tell you that you have influenced me. Jiang Shangzhen didn't know the twists and turns here. Previously in the capital, Chao Gingxin, the minister of the Ministry of Civil Affairs, came up with a chance to seek wealth, and he became the leader of the Dali Dizzy lineage as he wished, finally having more room to display his ambitions. The former kiln superintendent thought he was making a huge gamble with his family and life on the line. Unexpectedly, his choice was what Cui Chong had expected. Because Yuan Huajing has proved this, the national preceptor Cui Chong did have something to say to Qin Pingon, saying that Chao Gingxin is a more suitable candidate. As long as he dares to bet you, Qin Pingon will let him come to support the local monks and become the apparent leader. Can avoid many distractions from the common affairs, but remember to let the Prince Song Su and Chao Gingxin restrain each other. Overtly and secretly, they must not be too harmonious and have no objections to things, which is a wrong path that will become increasingly corrupt. But before Yuan Huajing told the truth, he first asked Qin Pingon 2 questions. First, how did he view the Xianxia survey once every 10 years? Second, how will we deal with the suppressed landscape gods south of Dadu and outside the Dali dynasty? Qin Pingon gave his own answer, and the landscape evaluation within the Dali court was changed from 10 years to 30 years. Select some mountain and water gods from the southern countries of Aquarius continent and give them a chance to make up for their mistakes to ease the north-south relationship between the southern half of the continent and the northern country. It's like an exam. The examiner who sets the questions is Cui Ching, and Yuan Huajing is just the marking officer. If Qin Pingon answers correctly, he will be commented on the correct answer, and if he answers incorrectly, he will be evaluated on the incorrect answer. If Qin Pingon, as the successor of Dali's imperial master, does not make any changes to Cui Han's established policies, Yuan Huajing can pretend that he knows nothing. Qin Pingon smiled and asked if every earthly branch monk had his or her own mission, waiting for him to make a decision, and then beat himself according to the order? Yuan Huajing shook his head and said he didn't know. If Qin Guosher had the ability, he would ask for the answer himself. There is no need to trick me here. Seeing Yuan Jianxian treat others with such sincerity, Master Qin was very pleased, so he reciprocated his kindness and promised personally that if Yuan Jianxian failed to retreat at the sword worship platform, all his spiritual energy would be consumed, and Luopa Mountain would not accept a single piece of snow money. Yuan Huajing's face turned dark on the spot. Fortunately, when I arrived at the sword worship platform, I often consulted with Gontang on swordsmanship and I gained a lot. Especially during this period, Xiago for some unknown reason actually took the initiative to give Yuan Huajing a few words, which made Yuan Huajing suddenly enlightened. It is not an exaggeration to say that hearing a few words from her was worth more than 10 years of hard work. Yuan Huajing's determination to break through this retreat has become increasingly determined. Even if Luo Shan chases him away, he won't leave. At that time, Xiago didn't think that Yuan Huajing's qualifications were worthy of a few words of advice from her, but that was not the case. Don't let Xiaomo misunderstand. Xiago just couldn't stand fools doing stupid things, making simple sword practice so complicated that she was really anxious to watch from the sidelines. This is like a schoolboy doing the simplest arithmetic problem. 1 plus 9, 2 plus 8, 3 plus 7. Both equal 10. You little Yuaning, why do you insist on 1 plus 2 plus 3 or something like that? The key is I accidentally added 1, 2 and 3, and then subtraction or even multiplication and division. Your sword training path is quite fancy. Seeing that Xiago wanted to press Yuan Huajing's head to the ground, it was 10. She knew at a glance that the answer was 10. No matter how weak your qualifications are or how stupid you are, you shouldn't do this to yourself. At first, Xiago was worried that she had misunderstood Yuan Jianxian and was deliberately complicating a simple problem. She looked at it for a while and found that it was not the case, or that there was something wrong with the young man's brain. The same sword cultivator is also a genius, even if it is calculated based on the 100 years of Taoism. Yuan Huajing seems that this problem is not simple, but in fact it is really difficult. Xiago thought this question was not difficult at first, but in fact it was even simpler. As for Ning Yao, she may not see any problems. Are you talking about our Lord Qinshan? Probably because he is very patient. No matter how he adds, subtracts, multiplies or divides, he has to try again and again, deliberately taking long detours, and he will always get the correct answer anyway. No matter what, when Yuan Huajing arrived at Luapa Mountain and came back to the sword worship platform, he no longer felt that he was a genius at all. Sure enough, he still needed to work hard to practice swordsmanship. Qin Lingjun wandered here alone and saw a large group of people sitting there eating melon seeds, complaining about why they didn't take him with them. Jiang Shangzhen said, "The mountain master needs to retreat for a period of time. How about letting me take over the teaching at the village school for a few days?" Qin Pingon glanced at him and said nothing. Miyu shook his head. This was more of a summer palace than a summer palace. In order to regain some ground with Xiaomao, Chief Zhou was a bit desperate and would do whatever it took. Qin Lingjun patted Chief Zhou's arm and said, "Don't be brave, you are not this material. I'm not the kind of person who likes the new but hates the old. No matter how good Xiaomao is, you are also very good, Chief Zhou." Jiang Shangzhen, on the other hand, rarely looked serious and said with a smile, "You probably don't know that I had a dream when I was young, but I was never embarrassed to say it. It was to open a bookstore in a rural market where no one knew who Jiang Shangzhen was. There is a school next to the bookstore and I will be the teacher. This dream of mine, although I am no longer a teenager, is still very young. Mountain Master, if you are worried that I can teach you better than you, then just pretend I didn't say anything." The atmosphere at the mansion where Shanju Chen personally closed the door to entertain guests was not as harmonious as the cliffside stone table. "Do you bully others even if you don't agree with them? What a great person with a great family and business, Qin Shanju, what a great person like Qin Yingguan." As a disciple of the head of the Dou Ran sect, Tamiya suddenly encountered a strange phenomenon and remained calm in the face of danger. He first protected himself with a talisman array, and then sacrificed several spiritual treasures, which illuminated the surrounding area with hundreds of feet of light, dispelling the fog, and asked, "Chen, what does the mountain master want?" The guy was still pretending to be a ghost and didn't want to show his true identity. He asked instead, "How about changing the question to a more meaningful one?" While Tamiya stabilized his Taoist mind, he made a secret with one hand, and pulled out 100-foot-long fire dragon from his sleeve. It wandered around the place and then swept away the mist. It was vaguely visible. He stood on the water and took a closer look. Next, every water pattern seems to be an ancient talisman. Tamiya was shocked. Is it a ready-made talisman array in Luolu Mountain? Is it going to be used by Qin Pingon as soon as it comes, or is it going to be improvised without anyone noticing? Tamiya was silent for a moment, with the chair still placed behind him. He finally realized it and asked with a sneer, "Master Qin arranged for us to live in this house. Is it just to show off the talismans at this moment? I just want to know how far the Fire Dragon Crossing River talisman, the talisman of the founder of the Dou Ran sect, can sweep across the water in one go." Qin Pingan's voice came from behind as if he was standing over the chair. Tamiya drove the talisman fire dragon with great momentum, and hit him back with lightning speed. Tamiya turned his head in confusion and saw that the man wearing a green shirt and long coat was indeed standing behind the chair, with his hands on the top of the chair, looking at him with a smile. And the talisman fire dragon heading straight for Qingshan for some reason became smaller and smaller. The closer it was to Qin Pingan, the smaller it became. It seemed to be no more than a foot away from Qin Pingan's forehead. The fierce fire dragon never stopped, but Qin Pingan turned a blind eye, as if he was sure that this talisman could not touch him at all. It stands to reason that this talisman has already traveled more than 10 miles in the blink of an eye. There must be a realm, in this small world of talisman formation, blocking the two people like a natural chasm insurmountable. Qin Pingan remained motionless, lying on the other side of the chair. The old said, "If the talisman can talk, then my talisman can make you complain endlessly. It seems to be so close but is actually the end of the world." Disheartened, Tamiya remained silent. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "I have a talisman that can make the fire dragon cross the river. 100-foot pole can make one step further, just like a mountain dragon walking through water and turning into a fire dragon." Tamiya angrily shouted, "Heretics are arrogant." Qin Pingan asked with a smile, "Since the fire dragon is destined to have difficulty crossing the river, we can successfully cross the river. We are idle, so why not guess what the name of my talisman is?" Tamiya was reluctant to give his guess. "Chiku talisman. The wise man has great words and the great man has great words. As the old saying goes, if you take half of a kai's stick in a day, it will be inexhaustible for eternity. As the Taoist priest who is most obsessed with spiritual practice in the Zhou Xian sect, Tamiya still has some vision and knowledge. Qin Pingon nodded. You guessed it right. Now let me guess, what is the material of the talisman paper? Tamiya said slowly, refining the long river of time is used as talisman paper, so it has special effects. Can be used to refine talismans just like running water. This kind of talisman method is the subtlety of Feixingong's talisman. Qin Pingon asked with a smile. A Taoist tree has 5 flowers. The Zhou Xian sect and the Feixin Palace are different sections. After all, they have the same origin and worship the same ancestor. We know that the stack of talismans is of great use. Why don't we learn from each other? Tamiya hesitated to speak, but in the end he was speechless. The stern-faced young Xiangtong, a Taoist genius praised by Yang Xianbao of Hebei Peak as the most accomplished talisman in Xian, was suppressed at the foot of the mountain by that golden palm as big as a mountain. He sat cross-legged and sacrificed countless. This natal object can hold up that mountain character. A man in a green shirt was squatting not far away, puffing away smoke. When this person occasionally knocked the ground gently with his cigarette stick, Xiangtong's face turned red and his ears became red, and he became more and more exhausted. Qin Pingon asked with a smile. Both Tong Xiang and Xiang Tong are geniuses. Since they are geniuses, they must learn it after just a few glances. I heard that Taofu Mountain often holds Taoist gatherings, and the disciples of the 5 sects can practice talismans. Comparing Taoism and learning from each other's strengths. Why haven't you mastered some of the Zhou Xian sect's talismans? Could it be that you haven't participated even once? Do you think you are the only one of the 5 disciples who is a genius? Can you become the second best in Xian? Who gave you the confidence? Master Yang Xianbao? Or is it because she took you to Yunmeng Cave a few times without exception? Xiangtong's face was livid. After all, it was rare for a young man to go out. He racked his brains and finally managed to curse a few words that he thought were curses. Qin Pingon smiled and said, Swear a few more words. I am in the mountains and don't know the mountains. I don't know what Hebei Peak is, let alone what Taofu Mountain is. Yang Xianbao practices the talisman technique by himself and is like a big family. He teaches Taoism to his disciples and is like a small family. She protected you so well that she only encouraged your growth. In the future, when Xiangtong will be sadly separated from the army, or when he will go down the mountain to experience his body and soul, he will look back on his life path and the person who praises Xiangtong's death will be Yang Xianbao. Little baby, you must be worthy of your master Yang Xuanbo's love and hope. Don't let her be sad and kill thousands of joys, making her regret it. Xiangtong's arms were numb and his neck was sore. The mountains above his head were getting lower and lower, and the boy had to lower his head lower and lower. The most hateful thing was that the man named Qin deliberately added another mountain to the mountain every time he said it, forcing him to nod in agreement again and again. Relying on Taoism and realm, you dare to humiliate people like this. Xiangtong's eyes suddenly lit up and he saw a familiar female crown forcefully break the formation, break through the restrictions, step out of the door and said calmly to the man in green shirt, Master Qin, please stop this. How can you preach to an outsider? No need to point fingers at me. Before Yang Xianbao of Hebei Peak could say the last word foot, in an instant with a flash of sword light, Nu Guan's head rolled to the ground and her eyes met Xiangtong's. Xiangtong was horrified in his heart. Even though he knew that the master was fake and the matter was not true, he still lost his Taoist heart in an instant. The mountain suddenly pressed down on him as if his real body was crushed into flesh and his soul turned into powder. The next moment, let's go little kid. I have no realm and no identity for the time being. I am purely a mortal person with naked eyes. I will take you to see the mortal world for a few times and increase your experience. I will broaden my mind with mountains and rivers forever, and use thousands of years to expand my mind. Trivial matters sharpen our Taoist heart. Teach a fragrant boy who has no master how to live in this world and see if he can find a place to stand in the world by himself. While walking on the mountain, Lu Biu looked up and saw the powerful demon on the throne at the top of the mountain. He guarded his Taoist heart and told himself that what he saw in his eyes was all illusion. As a result, the demon Zhu Xian struck him down with a stick, threatening him endlessly. Lu Biu's eyes widened with Taoist intentions and murderous intent, and he subconsciously retreated again and again. He pressed the long stick against Lu Baiyu's head. The big demon on the throne laughed loudly and shook his head. His face was full of contempt, like an awe-inspiring earthly immortal. Dao Xian is indeed vulnerable to a single blow. How difficult is it to kill dozens of Xian Tusk grandchildren with just one stick? Zhu Xian, as a bystander, I have a word of advice. You don't have to treat Shui Jisui like a god, especially don't fear him like the way of heaven. You look up to him, but you also underestimate yourself. Shui Jisui, as the heavenly lord and the lord of the first palace, do you need to reflect on yourself? The heavenly lord of other families will not say anything. As the direct descendant of Zhou Xian, those who learn from others will live like others and die like others. Naturally, there is no problem. But if you are a disciple who is nothing like the master and he is completely different in form and spirit, why does Shui Tianjun want to deceive the master and destroy the ancestor and replace him? The female crowned by Feng, who is so talented that she can eat talismans to increase her realm, has already eaten countless rare talismans that she has never heard of or seen in a boundless void cage. However, the more she eats, the higher her level becomes. Ben Yupu, an immortal, ascended. But the more she ate, she became thinner, haggard and skinny. She felt as if she had entered the legendary 14th realm. The thousands of talismans she had eaten could be spit out at will. She only needed to throwing out a piece of rune light as small as a mustard seed can smash the ancient stars into pieces or cut them in half. Can stir up the stars in the bright Milky Way and move them around at will. Celestial phenomena. She was going to throw up. Daoist Ding looked at the tragic scene in the house with corpses all over the ground, and his Taoist heart only calmed down after a slight ripple. Fake, that's it. Even if it is true, this is especially true for Daoist Ding. People who practice Taoism, why bother talking about good and evil? When there is good and evil, there is right and wrong. When there is right and wrong, if you live in the mountains to practice Taoism, you will just wallow in the world of mortals. I am afraid that the Taoist heart will not be pure. He was born in the blessed land of Taijian. Before he went to the mountain to practice Taoism, he witnessed and experienced a lot of suffering in the world. Daoist Ding sat where he was, still in a lazy posture with his neck curled up and leaning on the back of the chair with his hands in his sleeves and asked, Master Chen, this kind of fake and real show-off skills may be used on others and it may be somewhat effective. To deal with Xiao Dao may be to wink at a blind man. The man holding a tobacco pole and crossing his legs said with a smile, Daoist Ding, the sheep will die because of the differences in the road and the scholars will die in many ways. Daoist Ding changed to a more comfortable sitting position. He was no longer sleepy. He said seriously, if Shanzhu Chen wants to convince people with reason, it may not be useful. How about using another method such as convincing people with force? At least it can make Xiaodaoku feel dissatisfied. Unlike now, when Shanzhu Chen is wasting his time in the aura of heaven and earth, Xiao Dao also feels that Shanzhu Chen is wasting Xiaodao's time. Just like Wuxia, who previously showed you her relationship with Confucian Temple and Mr. Sheeping, she was very disapproving of the relationship. She felt that your state of mind was not worthy of so many titles. You were just a person at the table who liked to talk about who you knew. The only difference was that the people at the bottom of the mountain said they knew a certain richest man and a certain dignitary, and the people from the mountain said they knew someone. He just said that he knew Zhou Xian. The same is true for Xiao Dao. Things are not the same. It is in vain for Xiao Dao to look down on Master Chen. There is no need. Unexpectedly, Daoist Ding nodded seriously and said, Then let's find another way to get what you want and convince others with your strength. A moment later, Daoist Ding lay on the ground with a bruised nose and swollen face. He raised his hand to wipe his nose. His hands were covered with blood. Daoist Ding still smiled and said, Qin Jianxian, does his skill stop here? Qin Pingon, who was standing nearby, smiled and said, What you rely on is indeed not external things, but your own ingenuity and your determination to pursue the Tao. Otherwise, you won't know how to bypass the inner demons and successfully ascend to Yupu. You can think of a shortcut. Of course, I don't believe you if you say you've gone astray. Daoist Ding's eyes blurred. He changed from lying to standing, hanging in the air and overlooking the mountains and rivers of the earth. He saw that the ground was bounded by a long river, and there were two mountains cut off by the river. Two scenes appeared. One of the mountains, on one side of the river hundreds of peaks stretch. On the other side of the river half of the mountains have only a few peaks. Each mountain is higher than the other, but the road is obvious. The other mountain range is connected by long bridges across the river. There are only a few peaks on one side, but there are thousands of mountains on the other side. Each mountain opens up a mountain barrier, but the road is rugged, but there are no tall mountains standing there. The next moment, Daoist Ding was standing on the long bridge, and Qin Pingon stood aside with his hands in his sleeves. Use talismans to seal memories, use shortcuts to bypass inner demons and build bridges by luck. It's not useless, it's very useful. It's just that it can't be used at the level from nascent soul to Yupu. Have you never thought about why, after reaching the Yupu realm, you still have the desire to return to one's original nature and become an immortal? What you should be careful of is your kind. Smart Daoist. Daoist Ding, there is no need for me to scare you. Just wait. When you reach the bottleneck of Yupu realm, you will have to pay off your debt. During the years of cultivating Taoism in the mountains, you don't know what the cold and heat are outside the mountains, but you have to see the cold moon and the sun. Mon, if you come to Freirenshow, it will definitely make you miserable. Hearing this, Daoist Ding sighed softly. It's true that every family has scriptures that are difficult to recite. There is no other way. Xianxia, you don't know something. I don't mean to show my cleverness, but I came up with this strategy because I had no other choice. There are many experts in Yuhua Mountain and they are very knowledgeable, so no one is stopping you? Can I give you some advice? They didn't expect that I could come up with such a shortcut. By the time they realized it, it was a foregone conclusion. As an elder in the Master's sect, you can't push me to such a low level that I have to pass through the nascent soul again. There is no unstoppable path for mankind. Why not seek help from the Patriarch Zhou Xian? Who do you think Patriarch Zhou is? Meet him if you want and ask if you want to ask. Do you know how many disciples and grandsons of Patriarch Zhou there are? How many Taoist priests are there in 4 sects in one mountain? Patriarch Zhou, even occasionally when he shows up at the dojo to fill Jinfeng, how many letters do he need to reply to? How many Taoist priests do he meet every day? And how many general affairs need to be handled that he needs to personally review? If you have the opportunity, you can ask for it, why not? That's the talisman Zhou Xian from the 14th realm of Hadao Galaxy. Do you think Fei Jin is sending a letter or running to fill the Golden Peak? Why don't you ask? They'll help you ask for help from fellow Taoist you later. It's just this one time and I won't do it next time. When practicing Taoism, you must be afraid of impure Taoist hearts, but don't be afraid of impure Taoist hearts. This principle may not work for others, but you, Daoist Ding, must always keep it in mind. The Taoist priest turned sideways and said sincerely, Junior Daoist Ding, accept the teachings with an open mind and bear them in your heart. Qin Pingon accepted it calmly and asked with a smile, Daoist Ding is definitely not your real name. Your original name was not nice? Tell me. Daoist Ding glanced at the future scene and asked, Mr. Qin, if I hadn't received your guidance, I would have been destined to have a bumpy road ahead? Qin Pingon smiled and said, You really believe what I'm trying to scare you for? I can't stop you if I seek the truth. Daoist Ding was stunned at first and then smiled casually. He asked for high prices and sat on the ground to pay back? He asked, Mr. Qin, why did you deliberately use those words as a prelude to make Xiaodao Wenxia and us all despise you? Qin Pingon asked back. If I don't know where your disdain lies first, how can I know where your attention lies? I not only want to know what you, the genealogy cultivators, have in common, but I also want to know your particularities and differences. Fellow Daoist Ding, your practice of cultivating Taoism is quite impressive, but as for preaching, you are still far from it. Do you have any disciples now? Daoist Ding smiled and said, I haven't accepted any disciples yet. Also, Mr. Qin, don't call me Taoist friend. I can't afford it now. The Taoist priests in the room returned to their true state one after another, feeling as if they were in another world. Daoist Ding has become sitting upright. There are also Taoist priests who look dazed or sweating profusely. There are even Taoist priests who have to sit still in order to stabilize their hearts. He has long been sincerely convinced by Mr. Qin. Not only is this trip worthwhile, it is also of great benefit. Tamiya changed his mind and planned to first go to the other 3 sects in the mountain to study and inquire, and then go to the Lingbao sect of Nanpajuo continent to search for people. Stealing lessons? Shanjuchen said, that is called competition. If we, those who study the Tao, learn the Tao with others, can we be called stealing? Liang Chaoguan passed the test without any danger, but he still had lingering fears, thinking about the day when Qin Pingon would visit Taofu Mountain and Pasiho Peak, so he would have to use an excuse to retreat and stay away from him. Zhu Zishou is actually the least terrible Taoist priest. She doesn't know that those Taoist geniuses who are unattainable in her mind all look like they have seen ghosts and gods at the same time. The young Xiangtong was the last Taoist priest to open his eyes. He gritted his teeth and said, "Chen, you have countless tricks and schemes, but I won't obey you." The 3 Taoist priests at the Sanho peak of Taofu Mountain met different people on different mountaintops, and each had their own gains. Now I know that a talisman is not only called a big talisman if it goes to high places. Bai Feng sighed quietly. She almost vomited because of the talisman in that illusory realm. She thought about learning how to draw talismans when she returned to the Taoist temple. Qin Pingon, who was smoking a dry cigarette with his legs crossed, smiled and said, "It's just a little trick to make people laugh." Taoist Ding knew something was wrong and it was going to be bad. This sounds like a final word, as if the audience is stunned and will be decomposed next time, but this is not the case. Tianjun Shuijisue, who was sitting opposite Qin Pingon, always closed his eyes and meditated, said nothing and was deep in thought. Only when you enter the mountain do you know that Yunfeng is good. Hold an umbrella and slowly carry the rain. Li Muzhou is the only Taoist priest who does not have to endure hardships. It rained in the mountains, so Li Muzhou took out an oil paper umbrella and walked to the foot of the mountain. As the gatekeeper, the Taoist priest Xianwei had gone back to his house to hide from the rain, and the door was open. Li Muzhou was at the door knocking on his head ring. Hearing the sound, the young Taoist priest came out of the room, stood in the corridor, smiled and waved, "Taoist Master Li, come and sit inside. I have heard Qin Lingjun introduce in detail the greatness of Taofu Mountain in the divine continent of Middle-earth." Of course, the boy in green also showed off that he was sitting next to the talisman Zhou Xian, holding hands and chatting happily. This was the first time Li Muzhou entered the Taoist priest Xianwei's study. The first thing he saw was the study plaque, Xuanxiu, which means a lot. There is a pair of simple copper paperweights placed on the desk. The inscription is the very common content of encouraging students to learn. What is relatively rare is the same 7-character inscription. They all say that everything is inferior, good at reading, bad at reading. It is said that every inch of gold and every inch of time is good for studying but not for studying. Li Muzhou is a scholar with a lot of knowledge. After chewing a little bit, he quickly figured out the joints. Indeed, it is often easy for Yamashita to study when he is young, but he is not willing to study diligently. When I grow old, I want to read a book, but my eyesight and energy are poor, so it is not so easy to read. Taoist Master Xianwei is indeed elegant. The immortal captain who took the Taoist name Xuanxiu did not intend to be mysterious and said with a smile, "These pair of copper paperweights were made by the old cook, our great housekeeper in Lulu Mountain, and were given to me as a gift to my study. This person, Mr. Zhu, is a truly erudite man with a lot of witty words. He said that if you don't read books, you will lose your talent. He also said that our wisdom in this life comes from reading in the previous life, and the wisdom in the next life comes from this. I will spend my whole life studying." Mr. Zhu said again that reading is divided into inside and outside the book, but you don't have to stare at the words in the book. Looking at people and things, thinking more and asking more questions is also reading. Li Muzhou was convinced. This is indeed the truth. Mr. Zhu's few words are full of Zen ideas and profound Taoist meanings. No wonder I passed by the house that seemed to never close before and saw the old man painting in the main room, painting in ink and wash lotus. He spread a very long but very narrow piece of rice paper on the table, and then let the Jing Qing, the boy in green, drags the rice paper, a branch of ink lotus. The stem is more than 10 feet long, one stroke to the end. Feeling refreshed and full of energy. Li Muzhou is a master of painting, so when he sees this scene he can't help but admire him. Xianwei is used to being in the world of fake Taoists, so he smiled and said, "If Taoist Master Li can comment like this, it's pretty much the same." Li Muzhou asked, "The book's here." Lieutenant Xian moved a chair and said, "Look and browse as you please." Director Li regards this place as his study. Anyway, some serious books that have been read a lot are already hidden in the drawer. Li Muzhou thanked him, and after sitting down he picked up a Taoist book with more engravings at the foot of the mountain. He read a few more books and found a detail. Taoist Xianwei seemed to only read the preface and postscript when reading the book. It is obvious that the owner does not need to read too much about the content of the main text. Those lengthy words, he can just flip through the pages and get the general idea. Occasionally there are dog-eared pages. Is this the most important part of the book? No doubt an expert. No wonder Shan Zhuchen asked him to chat more with Taoist Master Xianwei. Xianwei felt guilty, but it was rare to find a serious Taoist priest. Sitting in his study, he was thinking about asking for advice. There were doubts everywhere in the folded corners of the pages. The knowledge is too low and the Taoism is too difficult. It is not easy for scholars to live in the capital. For those who practice Taoism, it is difficult to live in the mountains. The Xianwei hesitated, but he still mustered up the courage to point to a page of origami, read a few sentences from the book and asked tentatively, "Dao Zhongli, what do you mean by this sentence?" Li Muzhou heard that sentence in his ears and stared at the content in the book. What he was thinking in his heart was, did Master Xianwei mean something? Examination of knowledge? Li Muzhou, who originally thought that sentence was easy to understand, suddenly felt unsure. Could it be that this sentence was accidental and intentional, and there was something mysterious behind it? The Xianwei saw that the sect leader of the Jingwei temple was so high-spirited that when he encountered this sentence, he had to think about it seriously. The Taoist Xianwei felt sad for a moment. Yes. Reading books and cultivating Taoism is indeed difficult. Li Muzhou thought about it and couldn't keep silent. Just when he was about to speak, Xianwei sat on a chair nearby, leaning his elbow on the table, holding his chin with one hand, and the young Taoist priest with a wooden hairpin on his head seemed to be reading the book. The open book seems to be wandering thousands of miles as if talking to Taoist Lu or talking to himself. Mr. Zhu said that he also listened to the Dharma taught by a scholar, which consists of 5 words: Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva. The general meaning is that we should observe, read more books, world, walk more, practice the world, sound, listen more to what others say and what they want to say, and don't just talk to ourselves. And finally, if we have the compassionate heart of a bodhisattva, then we are truly practicing. Just like a Taoist who hears the Tao if the Zen barrier is broken. Taoist priest Li Muzhou instantly entered a state of mind where he forgot both things and himself. Outside the sky, Yu Xuanfei wanted to rub the old scholar's shoulders, but the old scholar refused. The 2 stubborn old men were pushing and shoving back and forth. I don't know who was the first to fail to grasp the strength, and the other one followed suit. You're going back and forth and looking at the posture, it's almost like a real fight. The old scholar suddenly stopped, twitching his beard and frowning. Yu Xian, what do you think will happen that will make you and Luo Luoshan turn against each other? Yu Xian smiled and said, are you worried that there will be a sneak attack similar to that ghost? 1 or 2 Taoist priests will die suddenly in Lulu Mountain. Just don't worry, how can I embarrass Taoist fellow Chen? First of all, these Taoist priests are all selected by me. And secondly, I secretly set a big talisman on them, which is both a talisman and a talisman. If anyone feels that there is an opportunity and uses some sneaky tricks, then don't blame Pindao for following that clue and going to visit them. Besides, fellow Taoist Chen is always cautious. Otherwise fellow Taoist Bai Jing would not be sitting on the roof. Brother Yu, it's normal for your family to have too many mountains to control. Having said that, no wonder fellow Taoist Xianxia said a few words to you earlier. Isn't that an injustice? With 5 sect prefixes, I can almost count them on one hand. Jingwei Temple is the poorest, but the family style is the best. Do you think it is strange or mysterious? You are here in Hedao Xinghe. Of course you are welcomed by everyone. Everyone else is convinced when they see it. Bai Yi said that he owes you a favor and will definitely pay it back in the future. Of course it is best not to pay it back. So you have reached the 14th realm. The Chinese Confucian temple must give you a gift, which is meaningful. Brother Yu, guess what? After everyone put it all together and thought about it, there is no conclusion. Give too much, I guess you will find it useless, and you may even feel that you owe the Confucian temple a favor. If you give less, you will not be able to protect all the mountains, palaces, and sections. You will think that we scholars who eat cold pig head meat in the Confucian temple are a bunch of stinky and poor people. To be honest, we are also worried. Yu Xian grabbed his beard, his old face wrinkled into a pile of wrinkles. Old scholar, please be honest, if you behave like this, you are a poor person. You are Taoist priests. Taoist priests must live in Taoist temples, otherwise they are in the Taoist temple, right? Old scholar Sun Qing. Don't force me to imitate that shrew's curse. I Yu Xian also have a temper. Why are you so impatient and quarreling? Mr. Yu, I'll give you another chance to talk properly again. Hey old scholar, aren't I worried that something went wrong at Jiling Peak? It's easy for me to lose my mind when I'm anxious. Please forgive me. Presumptuous, since you don't treat me as a friend and Yu Jinren has broken my heart today, I want to treat you as a brother. Why don't you call me an old scholar or a literary saint? Have half borrowed and half given to Luapa Mountain, 1,000 gold and copper coins, and lent 500 to fellow Daoist Chen. This account will be settled on you, old scholar, how about it? Brother you, if you talk like this, then I will climb up the pole and treat you as my brother, right? Xian, just talking about money has always hurt our feelings, and borrowing money means that we have lost friends. Where is the relationship? Is there a relationship like ours where the relationship becomes deeper and deeper when we talk about money? Brother you, did you bring wine? I have to be bored for a while, my brother's learning is limited and I really can't say more sincere words. Brother Sun, forget about drinking. To be honest, Ye Xing and I discussed it over and over again and finally came up with a congratulatory gift. I plan to give you 2 plaques. The Li Xing thinks it's okay. This matter will be discussed through the Confucian temple. There is a plaque and 2 plaques written on it. It's up to you whether you want to put it in the Golden Peak or not. On the other side, write Taoist temple. You can still put it wherever you want. The Confucian temple will only give it to you, but it doesn't matter where you put it. Zhou Xian was surprised and said, the Confucian temple is willing to give such a heavy gift? The old scholar sneered, who do you think started it first? Zhou Xian let out a long sigh and praised, fellow Daoist Chen is indeed kind and sincere, but he lacks a little bit of heart. His 6 direct disciples. Yang Xianbao of Hebei Peak in Taofu Mountain was once Zhou Xian's first disciple. He was reincarnated after the war and returned to the mountain to continue practicing Taoism. It was like one man had 2. Taoist Ku of Jingwei Temple and the main element of Guixian Mountain in Yuhua Mountain. Shuizhisui from Feixian Palace. There is also the Do Ran sect, the current leader, Master Meizhen, and Tong Meng, who has been in seclusion for hundreds of years. Of course, Zhou Xian now still has a little disciple who is hiding, but for the time being he lets Jingwei Temple help teach Taoism. After all, it is not suitable to take him to Xinghe to practice together. It has always been Zhou Xian's purpose to recruit disciples first to calm his mind and then to teach Taoism and skills. This time Shuizhisui was deliberately asked to protect the Tao. Indeed, as Qin Pingon said, the person who needed to polish his Taoist heart the most, in Zhou Xian's opinion, happened to be the Taoist Heavenly Lord who was his direct disciple. Such a large Feixian Palace is too depressing. Every time Zhou Xian came to Feixian Palace, there were only a few Taoist priests who dared to look up at him. He was neither on patrol nor sightseeing, but he desperately hoped that when he was walking on the road, there would be a Taoist priest who would take the initiative to ask questions, or just chat a few words. There used to be such Taoist priests. Although they would look awkward, speak incoherently, and ask some unclear questions, Yu Xuanle was among them and patiently answered their questions carefully. But I don't know since when meeting the founder Zhou Xian, the number of Taoist priests who dared to speak began to decrease. The last time I went to Feixian Palace, there was not even a Taoist priest left. Of course Zhou Xian could stop on his own initiative and call a Taoist priest who bowed his head and became speechless from afar, but Zhou Xian hoped that there would be Taoist priests who took the initiative to speak on any mountain road in Feixian Palace. Zhou Xian said, "Old scholar, can you let me chat with Taoist Chen for a few words now?" Although he couldn't see the scene of Lulu Mountain, Zhou Xian could still feel the general state of their Taoist hearts because of the presence of the talisman. That is to say, a certain Taoist priest's state of mind has really reached a state of corruption, and Zhou Xian also has the opportunity to save him. It wasn't until the old scholar removed the avenue barrier. Tianwai Yushuan spoke a word from his heart. Dao Yuqin is sincere in his hospitality. Qin Pingon in the mountains replied, "Friend, you has good intentions." Zhou Xian felt relieved, stroked his beard and smiled. 1,000 gold and copper coins are definitely not wasted money. In the long run it actually makes a lot of money. Unexpectedly, fellow Taoist Chen asked with a smile. They just got a negation of a negation and got a very preliminary affirmation. After all, senior, you gave me 500 gold and copper coins. I always don't want others to lose money when doing business. Yes, do you need the younger generation to push the boat along and strike while the iron is hot? Generally speaking, after the wedge is passed, after turning over the opening text, you should enter the middle section and finally come to the end. Zhou Xian said hurriedly, No, Dao Yuqin is busy in retreat now. It's not appropriate to waste your mind and distract yourself. A wedge and opening chapter are enough. Qin Pingon smiled and said, Senior, don't worry. From now on we will just hone in on things. Don't worry too much about Taoism. I will first take them to see the war scenes other than fighting on the mountain, and then help them tailor each assassination, such as putting themselves in their shoes. If it were Qin Pingon, how would he face the encirclement and suppression by the sword cultivator from Jiaxinjiang? Yu Xian said tentatively, "Why do you fellow Daoist Chen bother so much?" Huh. The voice of the heart is like a stone cow entering the sea. Yu Xian started to pull at his beard and heart again. In fact, it is the same as Cui Qing of Zhulu who taught Qin Pingan and Pei Qian boxing. First, make people unable to retreat and force them into a corner without any room for maneuver. For example, Taoist Ding was extremely proud of his monastic talent, knowledge and intelligence. Then destroy them all and rebuild again. If the same method is used by an Ascension Realm monk, the effect will be greatly reduced. This group of Taoist priests still had a lot of room to retreat. They fell into the hands of others because I was short of Taoist age. Qin Pingan, an outsider, may know the 5 sects better than them, whether he is a bystander or a visionary. Just say that from Yu Xian to Taoist Gu to Zhao Wenmin to Li Muzhou. Just like Qin Pingan himself, he lost patience with the 16 people who had just entered Tiaoyu Mountain, and he lost a lot of patience. Of course, this has a lot to do with Qin Pingan's current situation, but to say the least, even if Qin Pingan didn't have that fight with Ma Kushuan and wasn't attacked by a 14th realm candidate ghost, Qin Pingan would still be impossible. To preach and teach boxing in person, it is even impossible to go to Tiaoyu Mountain frequently. At most, you can stand at the foot of Fuyao, which has been opened as a private dojo, lean on the railing and look out into the distance, to see more of the progress of the 16 people's practice, and to determine their character through some details. In terms of character, he would meet with Xing Dafeng and Sun Yuanji regularly to check for any leaks and make up for them. There are 16 more people in a jumping fish mountain temporarily. What if the Great Li dynasty sends the second set of sword cultivators? Or the Qingping sword sect was not founded in Tongyi's Hao? Or wait until the mountain is closed for 20 years and then be lifted? All the vassal hills of Luopa Mountain will open their peaks one after another. There are nascent soul monks or far-traveling realm warriors sitting on the top of the mountain, and these peak owners have more and more people. Direct disciples and secondary disciples. Can't take care of it. Qin Pingan is just learning from Jing Juzhong, but he is not Jing Juzhong after all. Therefore, Qin Pingan felt sad about Yu Xian's good intentions. Isn't Yu Xian's troubled situation today the inevitable fate of Luo Shan and Qingping sword sect? The small sect is worried that there will be no support for the young and the ancestral hall will not be prosperous. Disciple, money, treasures from heaven and earth, spiritual weapons and foreign objects, Taoist secrets, just ask for more the better. Large sects will also be worried that their disciples will be mixed, the Taoist temples will be crowded, they will focus on one thing and not the other, and their hearts will be distracted. They will also worry about those good seedlings who will accidentally go astray, and their pursuit of the Tao will not be true. Yu Xian wants him, Taoist friend Qin, to be the evil person and the millstone that sharpens the Taoist hearts of his children and grandchildren. Qin Pingan accepted this hard job with a tacit understanding. Since Mr. Lao spent money to buy Taoism, Qin Pingan was not a rehearsal and practice to prepare for a rainy day? Not to mention it doesn't cost any money. In Qin Pingan's eyes, most of these Taoist priests who are noble and worthy of the reputation of immortal seedlings are actually young people. Tamiya, a Taoist priest of the Do Ran sect, was the first to publicly betray Taoist coup for the sake of Jingwei Temple. Qin Pingan almost gave him a thumbs up at that time. Na Wenxia thinks that Qin Pingan's style is annoying and disgusting. Okay? Qin Pingan felt that it made so much sense. She thought so, it was great. There is still a group of young Taoist priests sitting there as if they are waiting for Master Qin Shanzhu, who has heard about the name for a long time, to find out whether he has the real ability to live up to those rumors and deeds. Deep down in Qin Pingan's heart, not only did he not have any grudges, but he felt that their attitude should be like this. Of course, things like Xiangtong are another matter. As for Taoist Ding, who is an exception, especially Xue Jisue, the Night Watcher of Tianjun, the Feishin Palace lineage has too many rules. Of course, there must be rules. Without rules there is no rule, but if they are too heavy it will be too much. The nature of a Taoist priest is that the more restraints there are, the less relaxation there will be. How can man and nature be unified if the body and mind cannot relax? Generally speaking, in this sit-down discussion, Qin Pingan is nothing more than correcting mistakes and carving out rough jade. Better than that. It was said that he was preaching, but in fact it was not that serious. Qin Pingan was not so thick-skinned as to let them see what the dangers of the world meant, but he lived up to his name and did his duty. Yu Xian taught that a tree can bloom with 5 flowers, and that most Taoist priests can hold their bodies upright, but he may not have more energy to teach all the Xiang Tong who passes on to his disciples. Tai Gung Blessed Land Taoist Ding. Qin Pingon, an outsider, may be able to teach Xiangtong, an outsider who is close to him, and Taoist Ding may not be able to teach a Jingwei temple or a Taoist. Zhou Xian gave a questionnaire and the correct answer was public. Qin Pingon can just give a detailed and specific problem-solving process. Addressing each other as Taoist friends is not a polite word. One is trustworthy, the other is confident. After waking up again, Xue Tianjun, who was watching from the sidelines with Qin Pingon, stood up first and bowed his head. This time even the Xiangtong stood up and honestly performed a head-offering ceremony before saying harsh words, but with a slightly stern look on his face, still dissatisfied. The most unconvinced Xiangtong from Hebei Peak in Taofu Mountain, Bai Feng from the Dou Ran sect who now has a headache just thinking about the talisman, and Lu Biu from the Feixian Palace who wanted to ask Master Chen for more advice. These 3 Taoist priests, they are all willing to stay in Luoluo Mountain. There are many preachers over at Tiaoyu Mountain. Sun Yuanji teaches people boxing and learns boxing. In the same way, if you help to preach, you are cultivating the Tao yourself. I can't defeat a host who has the right time, place and people, but I can't teach a few children whose highest state is the Sevuing state. Isn't it easy to do it? That day, Qin Pingon personally sent the rest of the Taoist priests who were returning home to Niujiao Ferry. They saw the dragon snake trace at close range. Qin Pingon was amazed and said that he was not greedy at all, but he was deceiving himself. Qin Pingon actually made a Taoist inspection with them and said with a smile, "The Tao is in the Qiong Tower, the Tao is in the tiles. The Tao is in the talisman and the Tao is outside the Tao. Those of us who learn Tao should cherish it." Wuxia, the female crown prince of the second peak, plucked up her courage and asked tentatively, "Mr. Qin, can this junior start a mirror show?" All the Taoist priests saw that Lord Qin Shan suddenly looked like he was facing a formidable enemy. Qin Pingon said with a smile, "It doesn't have to be like this. If you pass by the Guipai dojo in the future, you will definitely have the opportunity for an interview. Repaying kindness with hatred, destroying my Taoist heart." Wuxia has a small regret. The little girl in black stood quietly and said nothing. Xiaomi Li didn't seem to hear anything or see anything. Yidan didn't know whether she used some talismans or came here on her own across continents. She appeared out of thin air at Nujiadu and looked at the man in green shirt. After confirming his identity, she said calmly, "Master issued a decree not long ago, leasing this cross-continental ferry to Lolu Mountain for free for 100 years. Qin Pingon pretended to be calm and nodded. Lolu Mountain would like to thank Taofu Mountain. Yidan smiled and said, "I also have to thank Qin Jianxian." Qin Pingon understood clearly and said truthfully, "I helped you get revenge unintentionally. It was just by the way. Fellow Taoist, there is no need to say thank you." Na Wenxia still looked confused. The smile on Yi Dan's face grew wider. Sure enough, Qin Yingguan is indeed a man of great authority. Qin Pingon smiled and said nothing. Yi Dan's arrival was unexpected enough, but after he appeared he was like playing a riddle with Qin Pingon, and it was even more weird in every aspect. How could the Yi Chusher of the Dou Ran sect smile with anyone? A few Taoist priests complained in their hearts. Could it be that this is still an illusion, that the stubborn Qinshanju is still testing our Taoist hearts? There was a young Taoist priest who felt that he couldn't stand it anymore, so he lay down on the ground to see what Qin Pingon could do to me. My Taoist heart now is simply like the ancient well. Yidan frowned and said, "It's a peak named Liang Chaoguan? What are you doing and how are you doing?" Liang Chaoguan laughed and crossed his legs. "Master Qin, next time I go to Dou Ran sect I will meet the real Uncle Yi." Qin Pingon reminded with a smile, "You have already met the real person. If you have anything to say you can say it clearly in person now." Shui Jisue said helplessly, "Hurry up, Shanju Qin is not cheating." Liang Chaoguan glanced at Shui Tianjun, then at Master Yi who was dignified and not angry and finally at Qin Pingon. He stood up, patted the dust on his body, bowed his head in silence with Master Yi and strode towards the ferry. "Go." Qin Pingon kindly reminded, "Forgot? Long Shizong has been loaned to Luo Luoshan." Liang Chaoguan said loudly, "I haven't forgotten that Pindao plans to stay in Luoluo Mountain and have a good experience." Without a cross-continental ferry, Shui Jisue couldn't help but build a talisman boat, which was enough to travel across continents. Fortunately, Yidan also returned to the Middle Earth Divine Continent with the Taoist priests. Hanging from her waist is an extremely rare colorful short whip, with the words, Hugong was refined in ancient Hushan, and the words Catch the Sea engraved on it. Jiang Shangzhen asked from the bottom of his heart, Miyu, you have been to the summer palace and you don't know why the mountain master is so wary of this Yidan? Miyu hesitated for a moment and answered from the bottom of his heart, I used to have nothing to do in the summer palace. I liked to read through the files and I really knew the inside story here. In addition to being a Taoist priest, Yidan is also a swordsman and has been there before. Sword Qi Great Wall, the first time he rushed to the battlefield he was seriously injured. He was seriously injured by the demon sword repairer Huiting of the Red Leaf Sword sect, who used pink powder. Yidan seemed to have also injured an elder of the Master's sect. Taoist protector, so she once made an oath. If he is a man, she is willing to become a Taoist couple with anyone who can kill her enemies. If he is a woman, she will serve as a maid for hundreds of years. I really don't blame our Lord Yinguan when he saw Yidan. I'm scared to death. If she insists on fulfilling her oath and refuses to leave, what will Master Yinguan do? Jiang Shangzhen suddenly realized, destiny comes in vain to shrink the ground whip, but it cannot shrink the lovesickness ground. Miyu said, if it were the two of us, wouldn't it be a big deal? Jiang Shangzhen smiled and said, this is where we are far inferior to the mountain master. The greatest charm of a man is to be clean and self-sufficient, to be single-minded in his love, so that women in the world can both desire and cannot ask for him. Miyu was filled with admiration. Chief Shou's words really spoke to his heart. Qin Pingon said, when Xiaomo comes back, you sword immortals plus Pei Qian will accompany me to the greatly capital city. Pei Qian. Jiang Shangzhen Miyu. One martial artist in the realm of immortality, and 2 sword cultivators in the immortal realm. Shema, thank you dog old deaf boy. These are 3 more Ascension realm sword cultivators. Qin Pingon, the new national advisor of the Dali dynasty, will appear in the court hall for the first time. Sword of Coming Chapter 1233. Chapter 1233. This mountain will be named Qin from now on. There is more than one cross-continental ferry, so the dragon-slaying stone must be something to look at? After boarding the ship Dragon Snake Traces and looking far into the distance, Shanjuchen accidentally saw the dragon's back mountain. Mi Jiangxian's proposal shouldn't be made when there are many people. Being the chief of the next sect, you still feel wronged? Li Muzhou is currently the master of Jingwei Temple. When the Taoist priest came, the Yuanying realm had not yet reached its bottleneck, but when he left, it was already in Yupu. Previously, in the study room of Taoist Master Xianwei, the gatekeeper of Luopa Mountain, Li Muzhou seemed to have been enlightened by a word, and his mood was enlightened. It was like a heavy rain washing away the dust, and it was like the clouds were clearing and the sun appeared. The momentum was like breaking bamboo. When Li Muzhou came out of the state of mental fasting and came back to his senses, he broke through the state. And there was no stagnation. The Taoist priest, who felt refreshed, still carefully checked his mind, and it turned out that there was nothing wrong with him. Li Muzhou immediately stood up from his chair. The thousands of words in his heart seemed to be a burden, so he had no choice but to give a very solemn speech. Like a Taoist priest worshipping a Taoist mountain that towers over the sky and the earth. This time the Taoist Xianwei was completely confused. Director Li, even if you don't know the answer to the question on the origami page, you don't have to feel so guilty if you can't answer it. The key is why your eyes are still red. After much thought, Xianwei could only come up with an answer that was barely convincing to him. He was worthy of being a serious Taoist priest from a famous sect. There are so many etiquettes. Apologies are so polite. Xianwei wanted to give Li Muzhou a head-turning gift. After all, he was the gatekeeper of Lulu Mountain, and the new mountain master of Fragrant Mountain. He also accepted an apprentice. The burden on his shoulders was heavy. With more status, he couldn't lack it. Got etiquette. Unexpectedly, the mountain master appeared in the study out of thin air, stretched out his hand to hold Xianwei's arm, and the intention was obvious so that Xianwei did not have to return the favor. If he hadn't become the master of Jingwei Temple, Li Muzhou might have been the Taoist priest who wanted to stay the most because of the heavy workload. This Luo mountain, strange or not, really made Li Muzhou feel too natural and friendly. At that time, Qin Pingon accompanied Li Muzhou out of the house. The rain outside had stopped. Li Muzhou even forgot to take away the oil paper umbrella. Xianwei took note of the incident, picked up the umbrella and ran to the door, calling out to Director Li, but Qin Pingon turned around and smiled. He said, just take it as a token of gratitude from Master Li, just accept it. Xianwei had no choice but to accept it. Li Muzhou was a little shy and explained to Qian in a low voice. That umbrella is just an ordinary object. Qin Pingon smiled and said, that's good. It's light on courtesy but heavy on affection. Taoist Master Xianwei now has a mountain top which is not too close to here. It's quite tiring. It's rainy so it's useful when walking on the road. Li Muzhou hesitated to speak just because his situation was too mysterious. Qin Pingon held his hands in his sleeves and helped to give an explanation that was far-fetched and very reasonable, but extremely reasonable. People who practice the accumulation of Tao power is normal. They stay up late at night and read the rooster crow without even realizing it. The world is white. Li Muzhou nodded and said with a smile. In any case, Mr. Chen's Luo Mountain is really a blessed place for poor people. I will come here often whenever I have the opportunity. I hope Mr. Chen won't get tired of it if I have more times. Qin Pingon said, since it can become a blessed place for Taoist priestly, it is naturally because the plants and trees here are closely related to the Taoist priest. The vegetation is like this, not to mention humans. Li Muzhou asked, where is the house? Qin Pingon smiled and said, Dao Zhongli can show up now. Li Muzhou walked out of the house, bowed his head to Qin Pingon and walked up the mountain alone. Qin Pingon walked towards the table. It turned out that Grandmaster Wen did not wait for Pei Qian, but instead waited for Bai Xian who was waiting for him. He was encouraging Wen to sign a certain book carefully. Don't you want to ask Pei Qian about boxing? Come with us, there are many people in strength and it is difficult for 2 fists to defeat 4 hands. With Brother Wen's full help, it will be easy to collect a Pei Qian in the future. When Qingqing was completely confused. He had no idea what was going on in the mind of this kid who drank wolfberry tea from a pot and invited him to join the gang as soon as they met. Seeing the middle-aged man in a green shirt and long coat, Wen carefully stood up with a strange expression on his face and his body tensed up. He cupped his fists and said, Lingfei Palace Wen carefully pays homage to Qin Jianxian. On top of Hehuan Mountain, the younger generation is frivolous and ignorant and has offended many people. Qin Pingon smiled and said, there's nothing you can't offend. To say the least, it's nothing to offend me. We're not a family anyway. It's a big deal. Outside of Luolu Mountain and Lingfei Palace, if you and I want to meet again, we can compete in the sky. It's still difficult. But have you still not guessed who that person is until now? Wen carefully wondered, are you talking about the person who was drinking at the same table with Qin Jianxian? Qin Pingon said, otherwise. Wen carefully thought about Grandmaster Pei Qian now and almost had inner demons. He couldn't care about that arrogant bastard. If possible, he really wanted to give him a big mouth. Qin Pingon smiled and said, Wen, think carefully, that sentence, if I am your master's grandmaster, Taoist master, I will be your grandmaster's master, can anyone say it? Wen Zhan carefully felt as if he was struck by 5 thunders and was dumbfounded. Is it really the portrait of the patriarch hanging at the highest point in the Dao Palace Patriarch Hall? The white jade Jinglu headmaster wearing a lotus crown. When Jingxin's face was filled with tears. Facing the direction of Hehuan Mountain, he knelt down 3 times and kowtowed 9 times. He broke down in tears and said in a trembling voice, Lingfei Palace Wen Jingxin, pay homage to the Supreme Patriarch and pay homage to Master Lu. Lu Chen's lineage respects teachers and has nothing to say. From the Xianxia who dared to scold everyone except his master, to the Tianjun Chao Rong who was deceived by his master and delayed his promotion for a long time but never complained, to his disciple Sun Xiangjuan as well as Zhao Fiyang, who still recognized Lu Chen as his ancestor even though he was expelled from the sect Qingqian, the real man who was about to fight Zhao Fiyang because he violated Taoism. And of course the arrogant person in front of him. When carefully, Bai Xian asked from the bottom of his heart, Master Chao, what's going on with this guy? Let me explain in advance, I didn't say anything. The conscience of heaven and earth just invited him to occupy a place on the hero spectrum. Qin Pingon explained, it has nothing to do with you. He always wanted to meet someone but he didn't recognize him when he saw him. He missed it. It's hard to say whether there will be a chance to meet again in this life. Bai Xian nodded. In this way he can be regarded as a man of good temperament. For such a good man he deserves to be included in the hero spectrum. Qin Pingon stretched out his hand and said, take that booklet and take a look at it. Bai Xian's spirit was shaken and he said happily, Master Chow, you also want to register your name? That's sure. Qin Pingon hit her with a chestnut, causing Bai Xian to hold his head in his hands and laugh angrily. Do you know that when Pei Qian was your age I had to go through my head several times before I could even say a word to her and make sense of it? As expected of Bai Xian asked tentatively, Master Chow, is it possible that once Pei Qian's boxing level reaches a high level he will be less willing to use his brain? Qin Pingon rubbed his eyebrows, stretched out his hand to hold Bai Xian's head and said with a smile, You are brave. After Wen stood up carefully, his expression returned to normal. Qin Pingon said, If Master Wuxian is not in a hurry, just go and wait at Tiaoyu Mountain. Pei Qian will show up to have a sparring session or two with you in the near future. Wen carefully differentiated between the two and said, I don't dare to say it's a discussion. I just want to ask Grandmaster Pei for some advice. Qin Pingon said, Of course you are a martial arts genius, but you are not a pure martial artist. Wen was careful and silent. Qin Pingon smiled and said, If you really want to learn boxing it will be easy to go up the mountain, but not necessarily down the mountain. Wen said carefully, Junior is already mentally prepared. Qin Pingon pointed in the direction of Tiaoyu Mountain. Pei Qian is already waiting for you at the foot of the mountain. Wen carefully clasped his fists and said goodbye and ran away with great momentum. A series of sounds like rolling thunder on the ground sounded on the road. Bai Xian praised, How dare you challenge Pei Qian alone, it is indeed respectable and admirable. It is worthy of me to make an exception and write down his name first. Pei Qian has followed his master so far in the world, and there has been a tacit understanding between master and disciple. For example, when Zhou Haijing wanted to ask about boxing, Qin Pingon said, If you are too worried about winning, don't take it too seriously. This means we need to pay attention to this discussion, but don't hurt the harmony. What Qin Pingon and Pei Qian said today happened to have the sentences reversed. The meaning is not difficult to understand. In fact, the only thing is that you can't beat someone to death. When Wen carefully arrived at the foot of Tiaoyu Mountain, he just clasped his fists and was about to speak. Pei Qian just said, Same situation. In a blink of an eye the punch has arrived. Wen carefully had no time to parry let alone fight back when he was hit in the neck by Pei Qian and knocked down with a punch. Wen Xining's eyes were instantly bloodshot, and the energy and blood in his body surged like a flood. Pei Qian lightly stamped her foot again and when Qianxin, who was lying on the ground with blood pouring from his orifices, jumped up. Pei Qian came to his side and with the tip of her toes, she threw Wen Qianxin into the martial arts arena on the mountain. It's really easy to go up the mountain. Someone suddenly fell from the sky. The 6 martial arts practitioners were shocked. Wen carefully lay on the dirt floor of the martial arts arena. He struggled to get up several times and vomited out a large mouthful of blood. However, his energy and blood became smoother. When he opened his eyes he saw a blue sky and felt so comfortable. If you can't withstand Pei Qian's 2 punches, you won't go down the mountain. Sun Yunji just glanced at it and shouted, Keep walking. A man sitting on the bench picking his feet hurriedly shouted, This dear man who fell from the sky is not allowed to come here to cheat us for medicine money. From that day on, there was a martial arts master in Tiaoyu Mountain who only received 1 punch from Pei Qian every day. Then he negotiated the price with Master Zheng and made a bucket of potion. The price changed every day. The market was still different. Wen carefully didn't bother to worry about it and let Master Zheng keep it in his account. The 6 people who originally thought that learning boxing in Tiaoyu Mountain was quite difficult, saw with their own eyes a Yuanyuan realm master falling to the ground every day, sleeping peacefully for a while and then getting up unsteadily, his clothes soaked in blood, and every step he took the ground was covered with blood. They are all bright red footprints. From this point of view, learning boxing is not difficult. Pei Qian came over to teach boxing at odd hours. When Xianxia liked it better if he taught boxing in the morning. After receiving a punch he felt like his whole body was falling apart, so he went to take a steaming hot potion bath, then changed into clean clothes, and felt sitting on the small bench in a refreshing mood, chatting with Master Zheng and watching the boys and girls practice boxing. It was very good and the day was very fulfilling. If Pei Qian only came to feed him at night, Wen Qianxian would have been worried for a long time, sitting on the bench sickly and unable to cheer up. He did not dare to ask Pei Qian for help. Master Zheng was still kind and helped Pei Qian. After a discussion, the daily discussion was scheduled to be at 6 o'clock in the morning. As a reward, when Qingqing would also lend a hand to Master Zheng and Master Tsun, teaching 6 children a few stances and boxing moves. Over and over again the name Master Wen came up. Because Master Zheng, who doesn't care about people by their appearance, was accompanying him to make jokes and talk about the mountains, Wen carefully didn't find his life of training and teaching boxing in the mountains to be boring. 2 guys who live in poverty and enjoy happiness on the top of a mountain are lying on wicker chairs. The swordsman eats melon seeds and the master eats longans. Brother Zhong, it doesn't seem to be a problem for you to be so idle every day. I heard that the swordsman Chao Anai is already a martial artist in the Golden Body realm, and that he Qizhou is not a weakling, he is the best in the world. Don't want the name anymore? Brother me, I will go to Tiaoyu Mountain tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. I heard from Xiao Mili that there is a far-traveling realm martial artist named Wen Qingxin there. I will go and meet him for a while. Brother Zhong, if I remember correctly, you said the same thing the day before yesterday, saying that you would meet with Sheng Dafeng for a while to weigh up the worth of the new janitor. The old cook's toppings this morning didn't taste as good as yesterday. Is it because I'm being naughty, or is the old cook being careless and perfunctory to our brothers today? Brother Zhong, please help me think of a more reliable way to postpone the date of going to Tongyi's house. Go to the sword worship platform and have a fight with that old deaf boy. If you get injured you can stay and recuperate. The old deaf boy may not be willing to agree to this. Brother Mi is the chief worshipper of the lower sect after all. Even when discussing matters in the Jisa Peak Patriarch Hall, the seat position is still very forward. Although the old deaf boy is of a higher level, after all he is just an ordinary worshipper of our Lulu Mountain. Guanda, it's a first-level crushing thing, not to mention that you are half a fellow villager and he won't even give you any face? No way. That's too bad of a person. That makes sense. Brother Zhong, have you thought of what to eat for tonight's late-night snack? I'm worried. Don't worry, think about it quickly. Xiao Mili told me privately that the skill of the old cook is directly linked to our requirements. Okay, if that's the case then I'll have to show my shame and give everyone more pleasure. The number of Taoist priests who finally chose to stay in Luopa Mountain became 4 because of one more Liang Chaoguan who temporarily changed his mind. Of course Liang Chaoguan was very afraid of Master Chen Shan, but when the young Taoist priest thought about the great reputation of his uncle Yi Chushi, he felt even more uncertain. This was called choosing the lesser of 2 evils. This is really not that Liang Chaoguan is timid. In fact, there are many Taoist priests, Tefushan and Duran sect who respect Yi Dan. Although Yi Dan native place is from the second peak of Taofu Mountain, and her dojo is on the mountain behind the second peak, Yi Dan is also an ascending master of one of the top performers of the Do Ran sect. The reason why she is the leader of 2 channels is because there is a mysterious cause and effect on the mountain. If Yi Dan had not been robbed at the Sword Chi Great Wall, he was destined to be unable to escape. Otherwise, with Yi Dan qualifications and bones he would definitely be an immortal. Should have been the peak master of the second peak a long time ago. The Taoist protector who was supposed to get a chance to help her escape was the Taoist companion of Tong Meng, the founder of the Do Ran sect and one of the 6 direct descendants of Zhou Xian. However, she was injured in order to save Yi Dan on the battlefield. At the root of the Tao, she soon died, and her reincarnation in this life is the female crown Wuxia who was brought back to the mountains by Yi Dan himself to renew their immortal relationship. Yi Dan felt guilty about the Do Ran sect, so she only kept the Taoist book of Air Ho Feng from the Jinyu genealogy. Then she transferred to the Do Ran sect with her own Taoist power and accumulated merits, and was gradually promoted to a high official in the Do Ran sect. In addition, she also served as one of the special Taoist officials of the Tefushan Patriarch Hall, responsible for inspecting the merits and demerits of the Taoist priests of the 4 sects in the mountain. There are even some rumors that in the early years, Zhou Xian had privately approached Yi Dan and asked her if she had the idea of serving as the Taofu priest of the Tefushan Patriarch Hall. She said no. It is rumored that Yi Dan's reason is that his moral character is too low to hold a big position. But in fact there is no such nonsense. Yi Dan and the Patriarch Zhou Xian from the beginning to the end she just said the word, no. There are only 6 Taoist embryos on Tiaoyu Mountain, and the preachers include the second seat of Lulu Mountain to worship Xiego, the man who was captured for a few days to worship Gontang, and the ones who moved here from Jiling Peak, the 4 high-spirited Taoist sects of the Middle-earth Divine Continent. 6 people went to the mountain to practice and there were 6 masters who helped them preach. aren't the two sides of learning and preaching equal to one-on-one? Generally speaking, the so-called direct descendants on the mountain are mostly the situation where one master leads several direct descendants. How can there be such special treatment that is rare and unimaginable, and is undreamed of in dreams? This made the 6 people who learned Taoism from Tiaoyu Mountain, all of them the girl in the mink hat who first came to Tiaoyu Mountain to be a master. She called herself Bai Jing and she had beheaded several throne monsters. Anyone who dared to believe such a thing would be suspicious. Probably on the battlefield of the Great Sword Chi Wall, I threw a flying sword at a certain throne demon from a distance the day before yesterday, and yesterday I threw a spell at another throne demon from a distance. Is that considered cut down? Xiago doesn't have much patience when it comes to preaching. Often whenever they ask a question, Xiago, who always likes to put second seat in his mouth, will stare at someone and look at each other, and the latter doesn't know what he is asking. Too mysterious or too superficial. Later, Xiago felt that their previous learning paths were too unsightly, so he randomly threw out several qi refining breathing techniques and cave transporting techniques, a total of 6 types, which happened to belong to 6 categories for them to practice well. Don't pick and choose, learn them all. She will test the results after a while and first determine their general qualifications for learning different Taoist methods. Then she will make a decision on how to tailor the teachings to them and start a small teaching. The 6 people didn't know what was going on. No matter how good their qualifications were and no matter how they were said to be monastic geniuses, they were still the outstanding ones in a certain country in Aquarius continent. Who knew the meaning of the Taoist name Bai Jing? Who knew that this girl in the mink hat was a well-deserved dragon among the Taoist priests, among the cranes on the ancient land? In any case, in the minds of the 6 of them, at least for the time being, Master Xia's Taoist attainments seemed to be inferior to that of the general worshipper, Gontang, who came later. Master Gon was able to answer all questions and all doubts could be answered one by one. Helped to solve doubts, and the answers were extremely precise and targeted. The old deaf and mute child was eating Coptis chinensis, and occasionally looked cautiously at Senior Bai Jing in the distance. The latter smiled, nodded and gave an encouraging or gratifying look. He was teaching well. It makes old deaf children worry about whether they who work part-time as part-time workers will become full-time workers. He comes from Taofu Mountain, his ancestral home, and is the first disciple of Yang Xianbao at Hebei Peak. He is Xiangtong and is in the Yuanying realm. In terms of seniority, he is Fu Lu Yuxuan's grandson. In fact, he is already too tall to be taller. Fixianging Lubiyu is a disciple of Tianjun Shuizhisui. Bai Feng is the direct disciple of Meizhen, the head of the Do Ran sect. There is also the first peak of Taofu Mountain and Liang Chaoguan. Among the 3 young golden elixir immortals, Liang Chaoguan was still a sword cultivator. When the elixir reached the 2nd level, he also gave birth to a natal flying sword. The sword rotated with the qi, and within the heaven and earth of Liang Chaoguan's body, an auspicious vision of Hui Shuo Xian Wang appeared over and over again, which made the ancestral Taoist book, Hunyuan 8 Scenes Sword Scripture, enshrined in the Patriarch Hall of Ho Feng, ready to move, like paying homage, like congratulations. Master immediately helped to report this great news to the Patriarch Hall, so Liang Chaoguan was qualified to visit Yunmeng Cave. He and Hibi Feng Xiangtong had always disliked each other. One thought that the other was enjoying the blessings of others. Every time he appeared, his eyes were above his eyebrows. One of them felt that the other party had grown up outside the Fulu Avenue because his cultivation aptitude was too mediocre, and he had become some kind of sword cultivator and had no future prospects. If it hadn't been for this trip to Lulu Mountain, since we hate each other, it would be better not to see each other. Taofu Mountain is a vast territory with more than 20 peaks, and there are more than 300 Taoist temples and palaces in the mountain. There are so many Taoist priests. You can imagine how many Taoist priests you will see at those 2 immortal ferry crossings today. If you want to see each other again, I don't know if it's the year of the monkey or the month of the horse. I never thought that now they would have to get along day and night, seeing each other every day. Bai Xian got Guazujia's advice and went into seclusion without saying hello to anyone. It's called retreat, but it's just a matter of closing the door and sitting on the futon. Bai Xian only used a stick of incense to break through seclusion. When he came out of seclusion, he was already a Dragon Gate sword cultivator with full energy and swordsmanship. A natal flying sword hovers around Bai Xian, just like thousands of white clouds lingering around a majestic mountain. There is almost a sign that the clouds are carrying the mountain to the blue sky. Bai Xian dropped his sleeves and said the word show, and the flying sword returned to the center of his eyebrows. When Bai Xian heard the commotion outside the house, he immediately became unhappy and looked down on whom. Do you feel that your retreat may not be successful and you need protection? Or do you feel that you have become a small Dragon Gate realm and you want to say a few words of congratulations to me? These are all stinky habits. We Luoshan cannot let you lead us into bad habits. Uncle Bai will not tolerate you being so vain and pretentious. As soon as I swallowed several kilograms of arsenic, I saw everyone scolding me when I left the house. As a result, Bai Xian turned around and saw Master Chao there, sitting on a bamboo chair in the corridor of his house. Bai Xian immediately rubbed his hands, squeezed out a bright smile on his face, and trotted to the man in blue shirt, long coat and cloth shoes, smoking a dry cigarette. In front of the guy, a man suddenly stood still and said, "Master Chao, there's no need to worry." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "This retreat has taken up a lot of time, and I spent half a stick of incense more than I expected. Next time I retreat I will keep up the good work." Xiaomi Li sat aside holding a golden pole and a green bamboo staff, and clapped silently with both hands. "It's awesome." Qin Pingon stood up, put the dry tobacco stick into his sleeve, waved the smoke and said with a smile, "Old deaf boy, we have enough manpower to help preach in Tiaoyu Mountain so you don't have to worry about it. I'm the master of preaching. Too many, but it is easy for those who want to learn Taoism not to know where to start and to bite off more than they can chew. Of course, if you are particularly interested in teaching, you can also go there and take a look. In short, this matter is not forced, it is all based on your personal hobbies." If the old deaf child is granted amnesty, his old face, which was originally wrinkled in pain, gradually becomes more relaxed. Never thought that Senior Bai Jing would look askance and want to run away. You are an ordinary worshipper with a low status and a big attitude. You still want to learn some swordsmanship from Xiao Emo and me? Do you know how difficult it was to get a line or two of true biography in ancient times? How many enlightened demon Qigong masters back then were willing to serve as gatekeepers of caves and guardians of dojos for hundreds of years in order to learn Taoism from a certain enlightened man? The old deaf child knew that he was on a pirate ship, so he had to pretend to think and temporarily changed his words. "Mountain Master, I think it is best to do something from beginning to end. I want go to Tiaoyu Mountain every day so as not to hinder me. When other masters are teaching, it is not difficult to go over there occasionally and give a few pointers, and it should be so." Qin Pingon looked embarrassed and said thoughtfully, "You want delay Gantang's self-cultivation, right?" The old deaf man glanced at the young Yin Guan. The Yin Guan didn't have any definite clues, so he had to make the least wrong choice. "No, since I have become the worshipper of Luopa Mountain, I have to do something within my ability." Just like a strict master who preaches, he asks his lazy disciple, "You are practicing so diligently and staying up late to complete your Taoist courses. Isn't it going to hurt your mind? Please pay more attention to your body." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "As long as it comes to your mind, it's enough to make do with the missionary work at Tiaoyu Mountain." The old deaf boy has a smile on his face and has told you all his beautiful words. We'll just give in. Isn't it just that we are not particular about it? This Lulu Mountain is really not a place for an honest person to stay. It's really not a place for humans. As soon as the man named Qin left, the old deaf boy saw that Senior Bai Jing looked unhappy. The old deaf child felt distressed. Where did he say the wrong thing again? Before leaving the sword worship platform, Qin Pingon smiled from the bottom of his heart and said, "When Xiao Emo returns to the mountain, you two will more or less take the time to teach Gantang Shi 1 or 2 excellent sword skills that are suitable for him." Xiego reluctantly said, "The old deaf boy is not worthy of being taught swordsmanship by Xiao Emo himself. I can choose a good time to teach him 2 useless swordsmanship." This time it was the mountain master's turn to look askance at the second seat. Xiego had no choice but to explain sincerely, "Lord of the Mountain, 2 monks have the same swordsmanship, and one kind of Taoism can be divided into 3 scholars. How can they be the same? My worthless ribs are Gantang's supreme treasure. Don't worry, he will definitely be grateful when the time comes. Damn it, if it were me, if I could help a few children preach casually for a few days and talk a lot of nonsense, I would be able to learn 2 things from someone, even if it's just a kind of superb swordsmanship that makes Bai Jing admire him. From this sword worship platform to Tiaoyu Mountain, I have to walk there on my knees every day even if I crawl there. Lord of the Mountain, I will tell you the truth. Extremely determined and will move forward without hesitation. Qin Pingon said helplessly, I believe what you said before and it is indeed sincere. As for the last sentence, don't add any superfluous words. Xiaomo will occasionally talk to me about some past events. Your so-called desire to seek the truth, isn't it what you are saying now? The ancestor of Sawano Xiao? Kill a few, get a few secret books, learn them and then block the next group of people. If you hear the instructions that are pleasant to your ears, you will accept them all. Xiego said shyly, Xiaomo is really serious, that's right. Qin Pingon said, no wonder Mr. Jing looks at you with admiration. It turns out that he regards you as a senior on the road. Xiego said cautiously, City Lord Jing often robs homes, kills people, steals goods and destroys corpses and traces? Qin Pingon smiled and said, that's not the case. It needs to be more subtle and in line with the rules. After all, we are in the vast world. If it were in the wilderness it would be hard to say. Wouldn't it be worse than Zhoumi? Xiego said, if the mountain master hadn't opened his mouth and calmed his cheeks, it would be impossible for Xiaomo and I to teach Gontang the swordsmanship. Qin Pingon asked curiously, why? Xiego grinned and said, Xiaomo doesn't like cowards like old deaf children. Xiaomo didn't like it so she just didn't like it. Qin Pingon said, you don't know something. According to the secret records of the Summer Palace, this Taoist friend Long Xing also performed great feats when he was young. The old deaf boy is unwilling to open this pot of old wine and invite people to drink. It's not easy for me as an outsider to overstep my authority. The cross-continental fairy dragon snake trace, which never leaves Nujiafu, is leased to Luo Yueshan for free for 100 years. Can be said that it is a good thing that the pie in the sky is delivered directly to the mouth. Jiang Shangzhen had already walked around the fairy carefully and shook his head. Even if Yu Laozhen was more sincere and willing to take the initiative to send dozens of main drawings and hundreds of appendix drawings to Luopa Mountain, it would probably be a pile of waste paper in Qin Pingan's hands. The reason couldn't be simpler. A rough calculation showed that there were more than 360 individual talismans that Qin Pingan needed to dismantle one by one. There are extremely many talisman boats in the world. This boat can be called the ancestor of the Fu Zhou. When he was young, Jiang Shangzhen once asked Mr. Sun a very innocent question. Why not make the secret Taoism of the Patriarch Hall public so that anyone in the sect can learn it? The old man just patted the young man on the head and said something vague. When you become the master of the family one day, you will know that whether you are willing or not is different from whether you can. The village school replaced Mr. Jiang, who was said to be Mr. Chen's substitute teacher for a period of time. I don't know what Mr. Jiang came to say to a certain shrewish woman. The next day, a child who dropped out of the village school and went to another village to go to another village jumped to class. He didn't have to walk far to and from school every day. This child Tong was very happy. Generally speaking, among the dozen or so village schoolboys, some prefer Mr. Jiang, while others prefer Mr. Chen. Taoist Ding returned to Lulu Mountain alone with a complicated look on his face. I heard that Mr. Chen was in retreat at Fuyao foothills. Fortunately, the mountain master left a message to Xiamili before he retreated, saying that when Taoist Ding returned, he would ask him to go to Fuyao foothills to discuss Taoism with him. Qin Pingon is indeed refining his sword in seclusion. The one who protects the gate is Xiedog. So Xiego is now even more dissatisfied with the old deaf boy, who is squatting in the manhole and not pooping. If you continue to work like this and show no effort, you will be stripped of the titles that are usually enshrined. However, before this retreat, the mountain master said that there would naturally be people willing to offer sacrifices in Gantang's place, and the preaching master of Tiaoyu Mountain would still be able to gather the number of 6 people. Is this the Taoist priest in front of me? Xiego asked. I left and came back again. What do you want? Who doesn't know how to speak politely? Taoist Ding asked from his heart. Will the words of Xiaodao and the seniors disturb Mr. Chen's retreat? Xiego smiled and shook his head and said, no, the distance is just like 2 worlds. With your skills, you won't be able to disturb our mountain master's sword refining even if you want to. Taoist Ding took off his boots and sat in the corridor with his head buried in his hands. He was a little listless and said helplessly, Xiaodao can no longer distinguish between the words Yu Pu and Immortal. It was on the way to Shui Tianjin's talisman boat that he reviewed the situation with the Taoist priests. Taoist Ding suddenly woke up and realized that he was in the immortal realm. Where is Yu Pu, who is so careful that the sun and moon burn his life? Xiego suddenly said, It seems that our mountain master is quite impressed with you and is willing to polish your calf-nosed Taoist priest. Seeing that you are not sensible and you are not enlightened, I have to find an excuse to let you return to the mountain. It is a good thing. Don't be miserable. With a face. The implication behind Xiago's words is very simple. Don't be ignorant of praise and don't distinguish between good and bad. Be careful of being chopped down. In the house, Master Xianxia was practicing his sword the day before yesterday and was tricked for the second time. Last time, a shocking groove was created on the neck. What is amazing is not that the injury is exaggerated, but that the 14 realms behind the scenes hiding in the shadows are able to ignore the Lulu Mountain Protective Formation and the numerous restrictions at Fuyao Foot, without revealing any clues. Just let a martial artist who was on the first level of the realm of realms suffer such an injury. The second time he struck cruelly, he directly opened a wound on the back of Qin Pingon, who was immersed in refining the sword with bones visible. This made Xiago, who was responsible for guarding the gate, gnashed his teeth in anger. Fortunately, Qin Pingon gave up refining the sword again, but the old was still there and he was not at all decadent. He opened the door, sat in the corridor and chatted with Xiago for a while. Fortunately, Qin Pingon had a caged bird. Otherwise, the consequences of retreating halfway would be serious. It can range from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth leaking out, to the severe consequences. A whole body of Tao Qi can be wiped out or dozens of years of Taoism can be damaged. Let's just talk about the dispersion of spiritual energy. Since ancient times, it is easy to release but difficult to recover. Every spell and magical power used is indeed throwing money out of the piggy bank. Separating the turbid and pure qi between heaven and earth requires a qi refiner to peel off the cocoon bit by bit. For those with high realms, it is naturally relatively easy. However, for lower-level qi refiners, this task alone will take countless hours. If there is no family education or guidance from a master, no magical treasures and spiritual weapons passed down by the master, and neither the location of the immortal ashram nor the harmony of people, of course you will hit the wall everywhere and practice will not go smoothly. Taking a side road, they only talk about cultivating one natal thing, and monks in the genealogy have ready-made cultivation procedures. Where can Xianxia Yeshio go to hear the Tao? If there is a teacher who teaches from teacher to teacher, that is called true transmission. If there is no guide, you will be confused for thousands of miles, and you will waste your time beating the wall. That is not the most terrifying thing. I am afraid that your practice will go astray and lead to a road of no return. Dead road. Refining and destroying a candidate natal object may be something that the genealogy cultivator can bear, but there is still something to replace it. For the wild dog-eating Yamazoa Yeshio, it may be the tragic end of the road being cut off. Therefore, Zongzi Dojo will set up at least one mountain protecting formation. Different Dharma lineages, and each peak also has its own formation, layer by layer blessing, in order to hide the wind and water, gather the spiritual energy and invisibly remove the filth in the world. Evil spirit. You must know that the operation of all large formations requires fairy money. This expenditure, if multiplied by the number of years, will be a large amount. This raises another crucial question about whether the mountain protecting formation can absorb the spiritual energy of the surrounding heaven and earth. If the answer is to absorb it, then how big is the surrounding? Almost all sects in history have different choices. Are destined to be unable to avoid this issue that should not be made public. Generally speaking, two sects are more than thousands of miles apart. They are afraid of collision, just like rivers competing for water channels. Luo Lushan's choice was extremely conservative, just to seal the spiritual energy of heaven and earth without leaking, and not to use a large formation to swallow mountains and rivers with anger. The Longquan sword sect, which was also on the border of Chuzhou, did the same thing. But even so, because the geographical location of the two sects was too close, as the saying goes, one mountain cannot tolerate two tigers, the Longquan sword sect was still forced to move out. And in the outside world it seemed that Yuan Qiong, the chief minister of the Dali royal family, had to take the initiative to make way for the young hermit official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi and had to avoid his edge. The Tiger King Wei Bo personally helped move the mountain, and the Song family of Dali, who was in the middle of the adjustment, also gave Yuan Qiong a compensation and allocated a large piece of land on the boundary of the old Beiyue mountain of Dali to the Longquan sword sect. In the eyes of other monks in Aquarius continent, all this is reasonable. There are even many rumors about people with noses and eyes. It is said that Master Qin Shanzhu, who met the dragon by chance, actually tried to find a place in the blacksmith shop when he was young, but was rejected by those with eyes above his head. Wan Qiong looked down on him in every possible way, thinking that the poor boy had no qualifications for cultivation, and was unwilling to accept Qin Pingon as his disciple. The latter was disheartened and worked as a handyman for a few days, so Wan Qiong simply drove him away. I don't know when Aquarius Island began to secretly spread a few sayings. Don't be too Wan Qiong when accepting disciples. Chief Wan is a good judge of people. Let out the big leakage Wan Jianxian. These humorous sayings were all told by Lu Xianying to Qin Pingon personally. At that time, Qin Pingon held it in for a long time and asked Master Wan what he thought after hearing these remarks. Lu Xianying thought about it carefully and said that blacksmith Wan's face was expressionless and his heart was calm. Explain? How can Qin Pingon explain this kind of thing? Should I explain it to Master Wan, or to those in Aquarius continent who spread the news? Don't let me meet you talkative people in person, be careful. Daoist Ding asked cautiously. Senior, is your Daoist age very long? Xiego twitched his lips. I slept for a long time and missed many things. I can't be considered a real Daoist. Why, if you are older and have a higher level than you will feel a little happier. Already? Daoist Ding shook his head and said, Xiao Dao would not think like this. Cultivation is my own business. Xiego followed the little Taoist priest's words and said, what a Taoist priest sees in his eyes is too focused on the things in front of him and the things at hand. What he sees in his heart is at most his own future, and he doesn't think too much about things other than the human body. The great way of heaven and earth, at least in my opinion, cannot be called a Taoist priest. It doesn't mean that you have to be a kind and good person, and that you have to crawl around in the world of mortals and walk again and again. It's just that now you Taoists and Taoists have gone to various families and sections. The ancestors, coupled with the Taoist classics that can be easily turned over, all require their disciples and grandchildren to accumulate external skills. Some Taoist priests also propose something like 803,000 merits and virtues. There are thousands of Taoist traditions, each with its own merits. The one and the other waxes and wanes, honor and disgrace rise and fall. But since everyone looks at one thing this way and holds the same view, it is naturally because this thing is profitable. Do you understand what I really mean? Daoist Ding nodded and said, Senior, I understand what I mean. Xiego sneered, don't pretend to understand that you don't understand, just pretend to be like me. Daoist Ding said, how dare you? Xiego said casually, the reason why I am willing to talk to you a little more about Xiantian is that I feel that you are more similar to those Taoist priests in the past, but it is only relative. In those days they regarded Taoism as more important than life. They endured humiliation and worked tirelessly. You can't imagine what it's like here. If you could hear one or two sentences from a senior Taoist, some people would fall to the ground. I couldn't afford it, I cried bitterly and I didn't hide it. I not only worshipped the grace of the Master's preaching, but also worshipped the virtue of heaven and earth's upbringing. I also worshipped my Taoist heart and I never felt guilty about the path behind me. You are not good enough. You are not pure enough. You don't really cry when you cry, you don't really laugh when you smile. You have all kinds of worries and thousands of calculations. You act like you are doing business with someone without knowing it. When Daoist Ding heard this, his expression was full of energy, his mind was swaying and he yearned for it. Xiego glanced at the little Taoist priest. He was indeed a man of great talent. Daoist Ding thought seriously for a moment and seemed to have some enlightenment. He raised his arm, extended a palm forward, raised it up and then shook it gently. If there are sages who can be called moral people in the future, they can divide the heaven and the earth into yin and yang. For the time being, we forcefully name them as good and evil. The road is rugged and difficult to prove and difficult to obtain. Those who practice the good path may die young, and there are also those who practice the evil path who can climb high. This is the most deceptive method and deceives future generations of Taoists. However, those who are willing to count will know that many people succeed in the former and many fail in the latter. Those who are new to Taoism and have fledgling years dare to say that they will definitely reach the top. Therefore, for the sake of caution, you need to follow the path of the former. Over time you will be the first on the road. Those who hear the Tao will invisibly become the guardians of the disciples behind them. No matter how different the legal system is established on the Tao, and if there is another door set up by the roadside, the Tao will be bigger and wider, and there will be many people who are traveling together on the same Tao. Going to the top of the mountain and ascending to the sky with great force, the Taoist refining a certain old site with a pure Taoist heart. 100 people can't do it, but what about 1,000 people? 1,000 people are not enough, but 10,000 people are of the same mind. Our Taoist priests can really do this, unite as one, and tens of thousands of years later the number of people, the momentum and the Dao lineage are as good as those of the battle to reach the sky 10,000 years ago. It can be broken and refined, turned into a city, or the ruins of the heavenly court can be overturned. Is it an extravagant hope? Why should the founders of the 3 religions worry about it for 10,000 years? Why bother? Disappear. Xiago said with a straight face and nodded slightly. It's okay for little Taoist priest. I haven't thought about it so much or so far. He has a much better mind than Yuan Jutsai. No wonder the mountain owner favors him. Is he trying to poach someone? Yes, the calf's nose can be worshipped like a mountain of poverty, which is more than enough. A flawless Dharma image in green robes, the sword Immortal turned into a rainbow light and swept out of the room, with his big sleeves swaying. The atmosphere was vast and the glaze was brilliant. In an instant they were already more than 100 miles away from the mountains and rivers. There was a lingering sound in Taoist Ding's ears, and Mr. Qin said with a smile, "Wait a moment and go back as soon as possible." Taoist Ding asked, "What is this? Is Mr. Qin practicing some secret technique?" Xiago curled his lips. Since there is no way for the Shen to leave the body, let's find a similar method. A living person cannot be suffocated to death. Taoist Ding sincerely praised. If you are surrounded by thousands of mountains and find your own path, you are talking about people like Mr. Qin. Xiago nodded. Little Taoist priest, you are more suitable for Lulu Mountain than the old deaf boy. Taoist Ding was shocked and said, but that old deaf senior who is one of the 10 sword immortals of the great sword Qi Wall? Xiago rubbed his cheek. Is the old deaf boy so famous? He insists on pretending to be humble and respectful to his predecessors. Could it be that this ordinary worshipper is not sincere? Xiago remembered something. Why do our mountain masters insist on insisting that you don't ask for Zhou Xian's advice? Is it because you have something unspeakable and painful that you can't ask for Zhou Xian's advice? Taoist Ding hesitated for a while but chose to speak sincerely about the matter. I like to do everything without asking for help. Of course it is difficult to do so, so I settled for the next best thing. At the beginning of my practice I set a framework for myself. For example, if I am blocked from climbing high in the future I only pray to Yuhua Mountain once, and this time I used it before forming the elixir. I borrowed more than 200,000 talismans from Luqing to the Taoist temple of Taijian Blessed Land. I also allowed myself to pray to Patriarch Yu once in my life to break through the nascent soul realm. Bottleneck. Since I can bypass my inner demons, I think I will use this opportunity before I retreat to enlightenment and ascend. Xiago said, that's very good. It's not about saving face. It's not about asking for anything. It's just about being cautious. In this case, our mountain master, the dog, is meddling in other people's business with rats. Taoist Ding shook his head and said, Senior misunderstood Mr. Qin, but in fact Mr. Chen's intention was deeper. Regarding my 200 years of monastic life, he was very positive and praised me a lot. However, Mr. Qin also had a comment that hit the nail on the head. It made me sweat profusely on the spot, which will benefit me for a lifetime. Xiago would not be polite to him. Tell me that comment and listen to it. Taoist Ding took a deep breath and said slowly, Mr. Qin said that I have never been truly desperate, and have never truly come to a dead end where it is useless to pray for heaven, earth, others or myself. So he asked me to think carefully and one day be there. What should I do? What will I think? And look back on what the path was like when I was born. Xiago rubbed his mink hat and said, You are not stupid. Do you have the answer right now? Daoist Ding said, There is no answer yet. But now I have several fresh ideas, and I will use multiple positive and negative arguments to verify the final argument. Xiago smiled and said, For example? Taoist Ding smiled and said, For example, the long river of time can flow back. When Patriarchy was filling the golden peak in Taofu Mountain, I would pack up my clothes and live outside Patriarchy's door, not to mention asking once. I would ask at least one question every day. Another example is when Patriarchy was filling in the golden peak. Beyond the stars, when I return to Yuhua Mountain, I will definitely carry a stack of amulets with me. When I go to the sky, I can not only ask for advice from my ancestor, but also overlook the human world among the bright stars, killing two birds with one stone. Xiago nodded and said, "You have finally figured it out. It turns out that what our mountain master calls begging and the begging in your heart are not the same concept at all." Taoist Ding nodded vigorously and said in a deep voice, "That's true." While Taoist Ding was stuck on asking for help, Mr. Chin was teaching me asking for help. Mr. Chin taught me asking for help when he taught me asking for help. One thing. In my mind, preaching in the mountains has a high degree of truth in saving people. Teaching people how to fish is not as good as teaching them how to fish. That's it. Xiago whispered, "Is there a possibility?" "I'm just saying it's possible. In fact, our mountain master hasn't thought so much about it." Taoist Ding said resolutely, "Absolutely impossible." Xiago is surprised. "You are a Taoist priest from Lulu Mountain, so you are just facing Chin Pingon like this?" Seeing the playful look on the senior's face, Taoist Ding looked confused and tentatively said, "No way." Xiago looked embarrassed, put on his airs and lectured, "The little Taoist priest is uneasy. How can he dare to preach outside the Taoist teachings? Our mountain master's good intentions in preaching to you have been greatly compromised." Taoist Ding smiled knowingly, put his hands in his sleeves, shrank his neck and basked in the warm sun. Lulu Mountain is such a wonderful place. Unknowingly it captured people's hearts. Xiago laughed and said, "It is not difficult to rebel and leave Yuhua Mountain. I will take a trip to Tianwai to see Zhou Xian while I don't have to protect the mountain master. I will help you say a few good words and allow you to stay. Just practice Taoism in Luopa Mountain. For decades or hundreds of years. Wait until one day you reach the Ascension Realm, then return to Yuhua Mountain. Then you can resume your Taoist priesthood and remain a guest in Luopa Mountain. Yuxian's Taofu Mountain, it's like picking up an Ascension Realm in vain, and it's a big mistake." Taoist Ding said with a bitter look on his face. "How can it be trivial to remove someone from the family tree of the Patriarch's Hall? Seniors are just joking. You should never do such a thing." Taoist Ding really couldn't do such things as deviant. "My body is disciplined and my heart is free. This is the path Taoist Ding wants to walk." Xiago said lazily, 200-year-old Earth immortals were rare in our time. The little Taoist priest can stay here for a few more days and try to get acquainted with my Xiaomo. He and Luo Bao, I have a very good relationship with the master of Bixiao Cave in Tan. In the future, when you achieve enlightenment and ascend, and have the ability to travel to the lower reaches of Qingming world, you only need to say that you are a Taoist friend of my Xiaomo. But you can't say that the master of Bixiao Cave is too narrow-minded. Xiao, it's easy to hear this opening statement and he will silence you with his sleeves. If you change your words and say that you are half a junior of Xiao Mo, the master of Bixiao Cave may be willing to chat with you for a few words about Taoism. Taoist Ding has roughly guessed the true Taoist age of this girl in the mink hat. No wonder you can go to heaven if you want to go to heaven, and you can see your ancestor if you want to. No matter what you talk about, there are no taboos. When talking about the old temple master of Donghai Taoist Temple, you can also talk about it so lightly. Taoist Ding couldn't help but asked out of curiosity, "Senior's Taoist companion, is he a Qi refiner of the same generation as him?" Xiago grinned and said, "The top 10 heroes in the ancient world plus 4 candidates total 14. Xiaomo and I have learned about half of them." This was the first time that Taoist Ding had heard about the top 10 rich men in the world. Even though it was the first time he heard about this, when ancient and world were combined, Taoist Ding knew the importance of the weight. He really couldn't imagine the realm of those 14 people. Taoist Ding asked from his heart, "Senior, can you tell me who they are?" Xiago waved his hand, "I can say it but you can't listen." Taoist Ding then asked in a roundabout way, "Dare I ask if the boss swordsman is one of the 10 giants in the ancient world?" Xiago shook his head. Qin Qingdu was just one of the candidates at the time. He didn't practice swords fast enough. He has that kind of rare skill and has accumulated a lot of experience. Every step he takes is sure. Taoist Ding asked again, "Where is the Li Xing?" Xiago smiled and said, "Still one of the candidates." Taoist Ding took courage and said, "Where is the founder of the 3 religions? Is that possible?" Xiago turned around and took a look. Daoshi Ding knew that he had gone astray. The founders of the 3 religions are among the top 10. The 4 candidates for the top 10 in the world are ranked in no particular order. Sword cultivator Qin Qingdu, the boss of the Sword Qi Great Wall. The young master was a guest, and later the ceremonial sage Howren created writing and had unparalleled understanding of heaven and earth. Bai Zhe was originally the most promising person to become the co-leader of the demon clan in the world. Mr. Fu Zonglis Sanshan Jiuho, his dojo was in Mount Tai, one of the 5 ancient mountains. Bai Jing once saw with his own eyes the detailed situation of Mr. Sanshan Jiuho preaching in the world. As for Qin Qingdu, at that time he was still a young man with thick eyebrows and big eyes and a Chinese character face. He was not handsome. In terms of appearance alone, compared to the old blind man's temple, he was probably hundreds of times inferior to Qin Pingan. When the battle to reach the sky was over, the master of Bixiao Cave, who stayed in Luobaotan and refused to contribute, relied on his Taoism and imitated that of Naji Temple, forcibly encircling a large piece of land in the human world, taking it as his own, and practicing a Taoist temple seems to be named Kaizhou. Then name a place in a state Guandao Temple? As a result, Daozu was offended. Xie Xiao asked, "It is said that Zhou Xian monopolizes the word talisman. Why did Hadao go to the outside world? Zhou Xian's disciple and grandson, haven't you ever thought about the reason?" Taoist Ding nodded and said, "I've thought about it, but I haven't figured it out yet." Xie said, "What's not clear about this?" "Naturally, there are Taoist priests occupying the road." Taoist Ding pointed at the sky and said, "What this junior is confused about is that since the senior has such a high level of Taoism and succeeded in joining the Tao early, why didn't he just go to the sky to refine the stars and make a talisman? He did this. You juniors and backwards have no way to go. How can you talk about the unstoppable road? You will be trapped in a jar for 10,000 years and you won't be able to breathe at all." Xie smiled and said, "I will blame you to death." In fact, it was not only Zhou Xian who was able to make great progress with this unique approach, but Wei Shi, the AI Aizhou, also benefited from the initiative of Mr. Sanshan Jiuho to give way, and had a chance to reach the 14th realm of Hadao. It is a pity that Wei Shi, who calls himself the master of 37 peaks, is not up to par, has poor moral ability and has a poor chess move. After hearing Xiego's explanation, Taoist Ding suddenly realized that there really are Taoist priests who are willing to take the initiative to make way for future generations. There is one more expert in my heart. Taoist Ding stood up, walked down the steps, met Tianji and paid a distant salute to the senior Falu who still had no name or Taoist name. Xiego thought of something again and was so happy. The more she thought about it, the more fun she felt. She couldn't help but laugh out loud. She lay in the corridor dangling her legs. Xiaomo, go home quickly." Taoist Ding asked, "Senior, may I ask where the dojo is located?" Now that he has made up his mind to stay here for more time, Taoist Ding wants to have more contact with this senior. Even if he doesn't ask for Dharma, it would be good to ask more about the almanac of thousands of years ago. Xiego rolled his eyes and said, "Without a serious dojo, our Luopa mountain has never held an official peak opening ceremony. Since Xiaomo doesn't have his own mountain top, I will marry a chicken, follow a chicken, marry a dog, follow a dog. Of course there will be no. Maybe the first person to receive this honor is the Taoist Xianwei who is guarding the gate at the foot of the mountain. After that, those in the nascent soul realm will follow suit. We, the mountain masters, are determined." Taoist Ding was speechless. The old deaf boy of Jianqi Great Wall, the senior in front of her, plus her Taoist companion. Mr. Chen's Luoluo Mountain, which has just received the title of sect, seems to be a bit crowded with the great monks standing on the top of the mountain, Jimwu Mountain. The originally sunny sky and earth were dark and unclear, as if the mountains were covered by layers of clouds and mist. Outside the mountain, a towering Dharma statue in a blue shirt carrying a sword walked towards the mountain in the air. Walking outside the gate archway of Zhenwu Mountain, the sword Immortal was already as tall as an ordinary person. Like a who travels around the world at night, shrinking into mountains and rivers, all kinds of things are unrestricted and time is infinite. There was a middle-aged patriarch in the mountain. He walked out of the main hall and went down the mountain to entertain the guests. A reunion after so many years seems like it happened yesterday, so vividly in my mind. When the two sides meet, it is like unfolding a picture with the ink not yet dry. This middle-aged man, whose appearance and temperament seemed to have not changed at all, even his attire remained the same as before, with a sword on his back and a talisman hanging on his waist. He was the military monk who brought Ma Kuxuan out of Lizhu Cave. He was Ma Kuxuan's nominal preacher and secret protector. Both parties had the status of master and disciple. As if he were in a time scroll, revisiting his old place hand in hand, the man looked around and said with a smile, "It's so lifelike that it's hard to distinguish between true and false." A boy with straw sandals who had a hard time surviving back then with such good means. Now I have already asked Qin Jianxian of Xinjiang Mountain, so I can say a few more words. There was no sign of turning a big deal into a trivial matter. Instead he took the initiative to reveal the wedge of the conversation back then, without Qin Pingon needing to remind him. In the scroll the location is the Immortal tomb outside the town. The man explained his reasoning to the young man. You are not qualified to bargain. If you agree, just nod. If you don't agree, just keep silent. If you feel it's unfair and unwilling, and if you are lucky enough to escape from the old ape, then you can go to Zhenwu Mountain when you leave the town. Come to me and ask for what you think is justice. There was no look of resentment on the young man's face, his eyes were bright and he just replied, if I have a chance I will. As an outsider, Ma Kuxuan obviously wanted to say something at that time, but the man said something back. A dead person is not qualified to speak harshly to a living person. At this moment, Qin Pingan's eyes were more on Ning Yao and the mud-legged boy holding a short knife. In his opinion, he and Ning Yao were a perfect match. Slowly retracting his gaze, Qin Pingan let all the characters in the scroll temporarily leave the scene. With his hands in his sleeves, they spread out over the tombs of the gods that had not been converted into temples by the Great Li dynasty. He smiled and said, Senior's words back then, intuitively I can hear them. He didn't mean any harm to me. But to be honest, I didn't understand this principle at first. During the subsequent trips I thought about it over and over again and chewed it, and it left a lot of aftertaste. The man walked aside and said frankly and honestly, at most I have no hostility towards you. But I can't say that I have any goodwill. I was just afraid that you were young, especially with the woman you like watching, and you would be a passionate person easily. The superiors acted impulsively and missed their way before they really grew up. They stumbled here, which led to a deeper grudge between you and me. A certain ancestor of Zhenwu Mountain made things difficult for a junior in his own territory. This kind of thing would not be spread out. Not nice. He did notice very early on that Qin Pingon had a fighting spirit. Qin Pingon thought to himself and said, Senior is a military master who has cultivated his mind and strength. Therefore he is in the mountains and looks outside the mountains. The gods in the above 5 realms also have no ill intentions towards the mortal Qin Pingon. Unless he is on the battlefield, only then would I be hostile to anyone. The Immortal tomb where I fought with Ma Kuxuan was not the battlefield of my predecessors, so there was no murderous intention, let alone the slightest intention to kill. I didn't even hesitate. If I hadn't defeated Ma Kuxuan, but Ma Kuxuan is better than me. If he wants to kill me again, Senior will stop him. The man nodded. I will stop you from killing him, and I will also stop him from killing you. I am partial to Ma Kuxuan because of my status as a mountain sect. At the same time, I will not be too partial to him. It is due to my personal personality and I am not allowed to do so. Do what is necessary. At this point, the man's expression became strange. He came with a strong momentum and brought up the old things again. Could it be that this is not an attack on the enemy? He couldn't be here to thank me, right? Qin Pingon was still talking to himself. But I don't know if the seniors are aware of it. Huan Shu still harbors an invisible malice without knowing it. It was the first time that Qin Pingon called him by his first name. The man suppressed his smile and said, I would like to hear the details and help me solve my doubts. I don't know the true face of heaven and earth just because I am in the world of mortals. Looking at his posture, does Qin Jianxian want to be polite first and then attack? Huan Shu found that Qin Pingon just looked at him with a smile, hinting to himself that since the answer to the mystery lies with him, he is the one who can answer the bell? Qin Pingan's thoughts suddenly changed. Huan Shu had a high seniority in Zhenwu Mountain. It was said that he was the younger brother of the contemporary mountain master Yueding. However, apart from Huan Shu's experience in Zhenwu Mountain, Huan Shu's origins were the same. The regiment was so foggy that there was no record even of the Daoist intelligence. Only a concise comment that this person came from the ancestral family of the Central and Eastern military dynasty. Because he has a good senior brother and also met the first ancestor of the military strategist again, Zhenwu Mountain has a spare time. More than just wandering thousands of miles, Qin Pingon chose to imprison the gods by forgetting key words and personnel. Sex is often something that is temporarily remembered after seeing or hearing something as a key word that opens a certain key to the door. So what I am thinking about at the moment is the Sui Chu Gong Wu Shuangjiang, and then extending all the way there is still Ai Zhe Wei Shi whom Wu Shuangjiang had tidied up once. These thoughts were like catching a series of fish, and the branches were overgrown and the fire started a prairie fire. They were completely involuntary and Qin Pingon could only think of them and they had to start them all again one by one. Self-destruction thoughts. Huan Shu suddenly said, yes. That's it. There are indeed 3 types of malicious words from people. The first type, such as the bad words in the market, is the most obvious. The second type is more subtle and does not need to be used in words at all. The content and wording are focused on, but it is a kind of class overlooking and scorning the lower and lower classes. Qin Xianxia's previous evaluation was to be polite. A real military monk from Wuxian, have nothing to do with Qin Pingxiang. When Pingyan said those words, he was in this situation. The last one is indeed hidden and difficult to realize, because it already comes from the one-sided world that Huan Shu lives in and the invisible malice towards Qin Pingan's one-sided world. At this point, both sides, I believe that words are no longer needed, no one needs to speak, there is a world of difference, good and evil are self-evident. From the speaker, from the class of the speaker, from the whole world. The man kept mumbling to himself, falling into a mysterious state of asking himself, does the Tao belong to me? Does the Tao belong to you? The road lies in the pure blue sky, among the muddy luss. Unknowingly, by the time Huan Shu came to his senses, Qin Pingon had already removed the formation, and the 2 of them were standing at the gate of the mountain. Qin Pingon waited until Huan Shu escaped from that realm, then turned around and left. Qin Pingon could even tell the difference between Ma Kuxuan and Ma Lanhua. How could he not be able to distinguish between him and Ma Kuxuan, or between Ma Kuxuan and Zhenwuxian and the evangelist Huan Shu? What's more, Ma Kuxuan also took the initiative to leave the Jinwu mountain genealogy before going down the mountain. Even an awkward person like Ma Kuxuan, who always likes to without wiping his buttocks, is willing to act in such an abnormal way. This shows that Ma Kuxuan has deep feelings for this sect. Men in fact have feelings for his master Huan Shu. Huan Shu asked, have you finished speaking the truth of Shanjuchen? Are you leaving? Otherwise, Huan Shu didn't talk much back then, just a few words, a total of 84 words. Qin Pingon asked back, I am now in a higher realm than you and my fists are harder than yours. I just want to say a few more words so that you have to patiently listen to me finish the total of 264 words. I have to take a step back and say, if you don't think this way, think otherwise. If you want to settle old scores without mercy, what kind of justice do you really want to ask for? How can Huan Shu of Jinwu Mountain give Qin Pingon? In this case, after reminiscing about the past, come here with a satisfied heart and return with a satisfied mood. Unexpectedly, Huan Shu said, don't leave in a hurry. The mountain master has been waiting for you to climb the mountain as a guest for more than a day or 2. Qin Pingon smiled half-heartedly, don't you want to have a dogfighting session behind closed doors, right? Huan Shu laughed dumbly, shook his head and explained without any hesitation, my nephew of the mountain master wants to discuss a scandalous matter with the mountain master Chen. Now it was Qin Pingan's turn to be surprised. Are you Huan Shu so senior? Especially the person whose true body statue is qualified to worship in the east and west of the ancestral home of the Tubing family and enjoy incense? No wonder it was this person who went to Lizhu Cave Heaven to take away the tokens of military strategists from the 3 religions in one family, and not the current mountain master of Jinwu Mountain or Fengxue Temple. Huan Shu said with a smile, what kind of temperament does Ma Kuxuan have? You and he are from the same hometown but you still don't know? If his seniority in the mountains were higher, he would be in trouble. Although Aquarius continent is the smallest of the 9 continents, it is the only big continent where 2 military ancestral courts stand at the same time. The mountain master of Fengxue Temple is a swordsman who likes to wield swords. He looks like a child, has deep eyes and has an extremely powerful Tao Qi. The owner of Jinwu Mountain, named Yueding, is a man of medium height and plain appearance. Yuding appeared at the foot of the mountain, clasped his fists in salute and said with a smile, I have met Master Qin, my great-uncle Master Huan. Qin Pingon glanced at Huan Shu. Huan Shu glared at Yueding. Yuding knew that there was something wrong, but he saw that his uncle and Qin Pingon were having a good chat, so he thought there was no need to hide your true seniority. Huan Shu said, I have already been brought to you, so I will go to the Patriarch's Hall. If you have something to do recently, please don't disturb me. Yuding saluted again. I will obey the decree of the law. I respectfully send my uncle back to the palace to light the lamp. On the other side of the mountain gate archway, a young female cultivator came. Her face and demeanor were somewhat similar to Yueting's. Qin Pingon did not move to climb the mountain and asked, Master Yueshan, what do you want to discuss? I need to go back to the mountain immediately to entertain guests, so I will stay soon. Yuding said, Master Qin himself is a swordsman, and he has a sect under Luopa Mountain which is a swordsmanship sect. Qin Pingon nodded and said, Fellow snow monkey, you are well informed. Yuding really couldn't accept these words for a while. The woman on the other side of the mountain gate couldn't help laughing. Shanjuchen is indeed funny. Is he just talking nonsense like this? Nowadays, not to mention Aquarius continent but also the entire Howren world, no one knows who. Not long after the young hidden official returned to his hometown, he established the upper and lower sects one after another. If this is considered well-informed, then if I can say a few more words later, I must be a learned person because I know so much about Lulu Mountain and Jianqi Great Wall. It seems that some of the rumors on the top of the mountain are true. The young hermit official has been sitting in the summer palace for many years and has accumulated baskets of flying swords, filled with strange yin and yang energy. Qin Pingon didn't squint his eyes and turned a deaf ear. Yuding said helplessly, Don't be rude. Qin Pingon smiled and said, To practice Taoism in the mountains, you must have a true temperament, which is much better than having a calculation in your heart. With family education and etiquette, just let your nature stretch and grow naturally. You are the embryo of Taoism. Yuding smiled and nodded. The woman lamented, but she was actually older. Yuding said sternly, Limited by my natural strength and acquired academic ability, I am not very outstanding, so I have been stagnant at the first level of the Jade Pu realm for many years. But being able to reach the bottleneck of the Yu Pu realm is not the accumulation of my own Tao power. So, thanks to the delay in the spring of a certain year, the speed of refining the flying sword is more than twice the result with half the effort. In addition, in recent years, a piece of dragon-slaying platform cut from Longji Mountain. Day and night I continued to sharpen my sword, and finally there were signs of retreat. Therefore, before the retreat, if Master Qin does not come to Zhenwu Mountain as a guest, I will go to Luopa Mountain and take the initiative to talk to Master Qin about this matter and express my gratitude. Qin Pingan's expression relaxed. He was silent for a moment, nodded and said, I see. Xianxia is interested. The contemporary peak of Zhenwu Mountain is named Snow Monkey. He is not only a military monk but also a swordsman. It is said that his natal flying sword is called Hua Xinfeng. When it comes to flower letters, there are two ways to classify them in the world: the 12 flower trade winds or the 24 categories. The former has a small number but its meaning is greater. The latter seems to have a larger number but in fact it is relatively narrower. According to Yu Ding's statement, it is inferred that the natal magical power of his flying sword Hua Xinfeng involves the latter. Yu Ding continued, We Zhenwu Mountain are willing to give up half of the Longji Mountain sword sharpening stones to make a deal with Luopa Mountain. To be honest, Dali Longji Mountain belongs to our Zhenwu Mountain share. Calculated in 10 parts, 2 of them it was completed and sent to the ancestral court of Middle-earth. 6 people including me, Uncle Huan etc., either needed to repair the ancestral hall, or we needed to refine our own swords, or we needed to repay some favors on the mountain, so a total of 20% was shared. And another 20% after discussion at the Patriarch Hall, are ready to be included in Zhenwu Mountain's treasury, and it will not be touched for the time being. Therefore there are still 40% of sword sharpening stones left on Longji Mountain, which have not yet been dug into the mountain. Qin Pingon immediately reached out and put Master Yushan's arm on his arm. Let's talk slowly when we go up the mountain. We can wait a while before returning to the mountain to entertain guests. The two sides looked at each other, both in silence. In fact, both parties were relieved. One is the unexpected joy that this matter is actually discussed. The other one was even more relieved. Master Qin Shan did not immediately turn his back and disown anyone just because he had just become the Grand Master of Dali. Otherwise, Master Qin would not have to go out personally. All he had to do was ask the Dali court to send someone to inquire with Senwushan. Is there any surplus for sending sword-grinding stones? In the previous discussions at the Ancestral Hall, no one hesitated to suggest that it would be better to mine Longji Mountain as soon as possible, and then discuss with the Zhongtu Ancestral Court to keep it on their behalf. In this way, even if he, Qin Pingon, becomes the national master, he would not be able to tear up the contract signed by Cui Han himself and immediately seal Longji Mountain, and then go to the Jinwu mountain lion to ask for all the sword-sharpening stones that have not been mined from the mountain. Hearing this suggestion that sounded good but was actually extremely lame, Yueding felt powerless. Lolu Mountain was only a few steps away from Longji Mountain? Even if he could pretend to turn a blind eye to the stealing of quarrying stones under Qin Pingan's nose, would the emperor of the Great Li dynasty really sit back and watch? I really want complain in my heart. I finally invited Qin Pingan to serve as the national master. Is this how your Zenwuxian congratulates me, the Song family of Dali? What's more, as far as Yuding is concerned, he is willing to make a long-term deal with Luo Pashan that will benefit both parties, both in public and private matters and in terms of emotions and reasons. Qin Pingan held hands with the master of Mount Yu and climbed up the stairs together. Qin Pingan praised. The remaining 40% of Longji Mountain is given to Luopa Mountain. Fellow Daoist youth spirit is already that of an immortal. Yuding was a little confused. Did I say that all the sword-sharpening stones should be given to Master Qin? The result of the previous discussion at the Ancestral Master Hall was to give Luo Luoshan 20%. If the new Imperial Master is still not satisfied, at most he will give another 10%. Give it all. Lord Yu Mountain, you can step down as the Mountain Lord. According to Qin Pingan's idea, being able to purchase 20% of the sword-sharpening stones from Jinwu Mountain would be considered a worthwhile trip. Don't say it's just a trip to the mountain as a guest. It's no problem for me to go to the kitchen, put on an apron and cook a few dishes to go with the wine by Master Yu. Yuding didn't know that Shan Zhuqian was used to being the boss of Baofengzai and the second shopkeeper. He just turned to look at the female cultivator beside him and she actually nodded. Dad, you just said it yourself, you gave me everything. When Yuding heard this, he didn't feel any sentimentality about the female student's failure, and he didn't think that she was turning her arms outward. Instead, he thought about it seriously. Qin Pingan was a little curious, so he turned to look at her. He didn't take his father's surname, it seems he was named Song Jing. Since he did not go down the mountain to practice and rush to the battlefield, there is no record in the files of the Dali Criminal Department. I have a guess. Based on the apparent background of Jinwu Mountain and the secret files of the Dali dynasty, the mining of Longji Mountain will not be so fast. Now only 40% of the sword-sharpening stones are left. There must be experts to help. Help cut the dragon-slaying platform. She smiled and said, Qin Yingguan, I am also a sword cultivator. I secretly went to the Sword Qi Great Wall. But before I went, I swore in the Patriarch Hall not to pass the sword, so my trip was in vain. Qin Pingan nodded and asked with a smile. I would like to ask, is it a single-character flying sword? She said with surprise on her face. You can guess all this, Qin Yingguan is really a god. Every single-character flying sword in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, as long as there is one holder of this kind of flying sword, it will be a top priority in the files of the Summer Palace. The Great Wall of Sword Qi will definitely arrange 2 or even more. Guardian. Just like Yueding's natal flying sword Flower Trade Wind. If it is not the 24th but the 12 Flower Trade Winds, then Yueding's swordsmanship achievements can be even higher. In the same way, if it is Yueding's natal flying sword, is it the legendary single-character flying sword such as Flower? The avenue is wide as you can imagine. However, the number of such single-character flying swords in history is too rare. Even in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, only 14 have been recorded in the past 10,000 years. Fijian's real name has a large number of characters, which does not necessarily mean it has a low grade. For example, Qin Pingan's Caged Bird and The Moon in the Well, as well as Lu Jinglong's Fijian's Tentative Rules, are both very high. But as long as it is a single-character flying sword, it must be of extremely high quality. Because this allows sword cultivators to do no hard work in refining energy, cross any barriers and practice Taoism, it is equivalent to possessing a natal character of a Confucian sage. Yuding smiled and said, her name was given by Grandmaster Jiang with help. The pride of my parents is beyond words. Song Jing asked, can you guess which word it is? Qin Pingan said calmly, how can you guess this? Song Jing had a small regret. Qin Pingan had already turned to talk to her father about business. Jing is the name of an ancient star. Since it was Taigong Jiang of the martial arts temple who personally bestowed the name, it naturally has a profound meaning. Since ancient times, military strategists have attached great importance to changes in celestial phenomena. It is recorded in the Yuling chapter of the Book of Rites that in the month of Jichuan, the sun is in the arc of Qihun. There is a cloud in the Tianguan astrology book that the arc 9 star is in the southeast of the wolf, and the bow of the sky is used to cut down the rebels in Huaiyuan. In addition, the sage's interpretation of the word has annotations, and the arc is the reason why the banner is spread. So what else do you need to guess about the name of Song Jing's flying sword? It's just the word, arc. Then she used her natal flying sword to cut the dragon-slaying platform, which could not only help Zhenwu mountain quarry stones faster, but also be the most effective sword refining method. No wonder she dared to express her opinion on such a major sect matter, and Yu Ding didn't think so. She's messing around. Slowly climbing up the main Shinto road of Zhenwu Mountain, the top of the mountain made 3 demands. One was to choose an auspicious day for Zhenwu Mountain to formally conclude an alliance with Lolu Mountain and the Qingping sword sect. Second, the sword cultivators and warriors of Zhenwu Mountain can go to the 2 sects to practice and vice versa. As for the number of people, if the discussion cannot be done today, we can discuss it in detail later. Third, when the colorful world opens again, Zhou Xian is going to select 6 to 9 people. They will rush to the colorful world in the future, hoping to stay in Feishing City for a while before going out. Longquan Sword Sect and Fengxue Temple, since the Longji mountain that belongs to them has long been exhausted and has been hollowed out, the Qi practitioners who have stayed in the mountains there to practice in the past few years are actually just showing off. According to the contract jointly signed by the 4 parties, after any force has completed mining, it must withdraw from the Longji mountain boundary. The time limit of the land deed shall be based on this. It's just that Wanqiong and Fengxue Temple each have a tacit understanding and have their own concerns and considerations. In short, neither party has reported truthfully to the Dali court. Even if Zhou Xian is aware of it, there is no need to please Dali on this matter. The Lisong clan had bad relations with Longquan Sword Sect and Fengxue Temple. So once the agreement between Zhenwu Mountain and Luopa Mountain is finalized today, the Dragon's Back Mountain will be completely taken over by Luopa Mountain. After going round and round, I finally realized that this mountain is my Qin Pingan's after I had longed for it but couldn't get it. Of course, Qin Pingan agreed to the previous 2 conditions that were not conditions at all without any hesitation, but on the 3rd point, Qin Pingan said that he must discuss it with Ascension City first. Looking at the young hidden official who started talking nonsense again in a serious manner, Song Jing had a hard time holding back his laughter. Who doesn't know that at the Summer Palace in Feishing City, Ning Yao is just helping someone take on the post of hidden official? Then who did you, Qin Pingan, discuss with, and where did you discuss with your wife? But to be honest, even Qin Pingan's mother Bea Pingzu, when talking about his Taoist couple, always said that Qin Pingan had a higher regard for Ning Yao. If he really wanted to become a Taoist couple, she would marry down. Song Jing just didn't think so. There was no need to climb high or get married. The 2 of them were just a good match made by God. When he opened a shop on the Jianqi Great Wall, Qin Pingan just drank some wine and went home late, but Ning Yao was willing to close the shop. All nonsense. Not sure if it was an illusion, but Song Jing found that Qin Pingan turned to look at him again with a kind smile, like the eyes of an elder looking at his nephew. Happy and kind? Yu Ding speeded up his pace intentionally or unintentionally and just stood between the 2 of them. Master Qin Shan, let's talk business, let's talk business. You must not be the protagonist of that certain landscape travel book. Now that the agreement was roughly settled, Qin Pingan had to rush back to Fiolu, and Yueding had no intention of staying. Strange, it's like guarding against thieves. Qin Pingan was confused. A grain of mustard seed transformed into a Dharma form, flying in the wind and returning to Fiolu Taoist Temple. Qin Pingan opened the door and walked out of the room. Probably because he was in a good mood, his sleeves were fluttering. It is rare for Qin Shanju, who has always walked calmly, to have such a heroic pace and conceited air. Then he had a quarrel with Taoist Ding, which almost made Taoist Ding have to seal his peace. Fellow Taoist, I have just realized an ascension method that can be called a master's method at a very small level. Do you want to learn it? Do you dare to learn it? As soon as this question came out, there was silence. It was so cold. Qin Jianxian was in high spirits and Taoist Ding was dumbfounded. Xiego was the first to break the silence and asked in a low voice, "Mountain Master, are you drunk?" A conscientious genealogist jumped out of nowhere, squatted there, spread out a blank book and prepared to write down the matter. There is that chapter title. Qin Junkai has reached the realm of immortals, but he can teach the method of ascension.